Picture yourself traveling back in time, not to the ancient China you think you know, with its great walls stretching across mountains and gunpowder lighting up the night sky, but to a hidden world of innovation so advanced, so brilliantly conceived, it rivals even some of today's modern marvels. We often frame history around the stories that survived the epic constructions, the famous inventions, but what about the technologies that faded into obscurity? The ones that, had they not been forgotten, might have reshaped our entire understanding of human progress. It's almost unbelievable to consider how much has been lost, buried under the dust of centuries, waiting for someone to piece together the clues. Today, we're setting off on a journey to uncover not one or two, but 30 astounding forgotten technologies from ancient China innovations that will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about this incredible civilization. From intricate clockwork devices that kept time with stunning precision, to earthquake detectors that could sense tremors from hundreds of miles away, these were feats of engineering and creativity that history nearly erased. And it's not just about what these inventions were, it's about the minds behind them, the visionaries who dreamed big in a world without modern tools, who solved problems we still grapple with today. This isn't just a list, it's an exploration into the spirit of human ingenuity, a chance to walk alongside those ancient innovators and witness firsthand what they achieved against all odds. As we dive into each revelation, you'll feel the thrill of discovery, the awe of realizing how much more there is to our shared past than what's written in textbooks. So settle in, open your mind, and get ready to be amazed, because what you're about to discover will not only expand your knowledge but leave you with a deeper appreciation for the limitless potential of human creativity. Our journey into the forgotten begins with a device that sounds like it was plucked straight from the realms of myth, the South-Pointing Chariot. Envision a grand, ornate carriage, perhaps adorned with intricate carvings and pulled by a team of horses. Atop this chariot stands a figure, its arm outstretched, and no matter how many twists and turns the carriage makes through a dusty battlefield or a winding mountain pass, that arm remains unwaveringly fixed, pointing directly toward the south. This wasn't magic, it was a masterpiece of mechanical engineering, a brilliant analog computer built centuries before the term was ever conceived. Its purpose was profound. In an era before magnetic compasses were widely used for navigation, this machine offered an infallible sense of direction, a technological North Star on wheels that could guide entire armies to victory. The sheer genius of the chariot lay in its hidden internal mechanism, a complex arrangement of gears that represents one of humanity's earliest uses of differential technology. This is the very same principle that, millennia later, would allow modern automobiles to turn corners smoothly. Here's how it worked. The chariot's wheels were connected to this gear system through a series of ropes and pulleys. When the chariot moved in a perfectly straight line, both wheels turned at the same rate, and the central gears would move in unison, keeping the pointer stable. But the magic happened on a turn. If the chariot turned right, the left wheel would have to travel a greater distance than the right wheel, causing it to rotate more times. This difference in rotation was precisely calculated by the differential gears, which would then transfer that motion to the figure on top, rotating it to the left by an equal and opposite amount. This mechanical compensation ensured that no matter how many circles you drove in, the pointer's orientation corrected for every single turn, maintaining its constant bearing toward the south. For ancient Chinese generals and explorers, the strategic advantage of such a device cannot be overstated. Imagine coordinating a massive military campaign across unfamiliar and featureless terrain. In the thick of battle, with dust clouds obscuring the sun and landmarks, a commander could always know his orientation, allowing for sophisticated troop movements, flanking maneuvers, and coordinated attacks that would seem impossible to a disoriented enemy. For traders traversing the vast expanse of the Silk Road, This technology could mean the difference between a profitable journey and vanishing into the deserts of Central Asia. It was more than a tool, it was a force multiplier, a technological edge that could shape the fate of empires. Its reported use by the legendary Yellow Emperor and later figures like the Duke of Zhou, while perhaps mythological, underscores the deep cultural significance placed on this invention as a symbol of wisdom and technological superiority. So why did such a revolutionary machine fade from common use and memory? The answer lies in a combination of factors. The chariot was undoubtedly a complex and expensive apparatus, likely reserved for elite military units or state ceremonies rather than everyday travel. Its intricate clockwork of wooden gears would have been susceptible to wear, damage from the elements, and required specialized knowledge to maintain and repair. Then came a simpler, more resilient invention, the magnetic compass. By the Song dynasty, the discovery of magnetized lodestone needles floating in water provided a cheaper, more portable, and far less mechanically fussy method of finding south. This elegant solution rendered the magnificent Rube Goldberg-esque complexity of the South-Pointing Chariot obsolete. It became a technological relic, a fascinating footnote that demonstrated the incredible heights of ancient innovation, yet also a poignant reminder that even the most brilliant creations can be superseded by simpler ideas. But while the South-Pointing Chariot helped navigate the world above, another ancient inventor was looking deep below, creating a device that could sense disturbances from the very earth itself. Move forward in time to the Han Dynasty, to the year 132, and you'll find a brilliant polymath named Zhang Heng presenting a breathtaking creation to the imperial court. A large, ornate bronze vessel, intricately cast with 8 dragons perched around its top, each one gazing down at a corresponding bronze frog waiting with open mouths below. To the uninitiated, it might have looked like a magnificent work of art, a ceremonial urn. But in reality, this was the world's first seismoscope, an instrument so far ahead of its time that its precise mechanisms remain a subject of debate and awe among modern engineers. Its purpose was as audacious as it was vital: to detect the precise direction of an earthquake occurring hundreds of miles away, long before the tremors could be felt by human senses in the capital. The sheer brilliance of Zhang Heng's device was in its ability to perceive the unseen. Ancient China was, and still is, a land profoundly shaped by seismic activity. An earthquake striking a distant province could devastate communities, destroy harvests, and cripple the empire's infrastructure. News traveled slowly by messenger, often taking days to reach the emperor. By then, the opportunity for a swift, coordinated relief effort was long gone. Zhang Heng's seismoscope was designed to solve this critical problem of information latency. It acted as a mechanical sentinel, a silent guardian that could alert the court to a catastrophe the moment it began. The historical records tell a famous story that proves its incredible accuracy. On one occasion, the device triggered, with one dragon dropping its bronze ball into the frog's mouth with a loud clang, indicating a quake to the west. Yet no one in the capital had felt a thing. Skeptics dismissed it as a malfunction until days later. A messenger arrived from a western province reporting a massive earthquake had struck at the exact moment the dragon had released its ball. The court was stunned. The machine was right. So how did this ancient marvel actually work? While the original internal mechanism has been lost to history, the most widely accepted theory, supported by modern reconstructions, points to an ingenious inverted pendulum system hidden inside that beautiful bronze casing. Imagine a large, heavy mass suspended like a pendulum from the top of the vessel. When the faintest seismic waves, the fast-traveling P-waves that arrive first from an earthquake, rippled through the ground and reached the instrument, they would cause this central pendulum to sway ever so slightly. This motion would then actuate a set of levers connected to the 8 dragons around the rim. Each dragon represented a primary direction: north, south, east, west, and the intercardinal points in between. The delicate lever mechanism was calibrated so that the slightest swing of the pendulum would trigger only the lever aligned with the direction from which the tremors originated. This action would release a hidden bronze ball held in the dragon's mouth, allowing it to roll down and drop directly into the waiting mouth of the frog below, creating both a visual and an audible signal. The specific frog that caught the ball instantly told observers the direction of the distant quake. The sophistication of this design reveals a profound understanding of physics that seems almost miraculous for the 2nd century. Zhang Heng had to conceptualize the principles of inertia, the tendency of the suspended mass to remain still as the Earth moves around it, and vibration transmission long before they were formally defined by scientists like Newton. He engineered a system sensitive enough to detect incredibly subtle vibrations, yet specific enough to ignore local disturbances like rumbling carts or crowds passing in the street. This wasn't merely a simple alarm. It was a precise scientific instrument capable of vector analysis, determining the direction of an event with remarkable precision. It stands as a powerful testament to a civilization that valued empirical observation and technological solutions to practical problems. Zhang Heng Seismoscope did more than just warn of disasters. It fundamentally expanded the sensory reach of an entire empire, allowing it to respond to the invisible forces of nature with a speed and certainty that was nothing short of revolutionary. While Zhang Heng's seismoscope listened to the whispers of the Earth, another class of invention was tackling a far more visible and constant challenge: the very water needed to sustain life and civilization itself. China's landscape is a dramatic tapestry of soaring mountains and vast floodplains, and its most vital crop, rice, is notoriously thirsty, demanding precise control over vast quantities of water. For centuries, farmers faced the back-breaking, limiting work of lifting water from rivers and canals into irrigation ditches, one bucket at a time. The amount of land you could cultivate was directly tied to the number of people you had to perform this exhausting labor. But then, a machine emerged that fundamentally broke this constraint, a device so effective its basic principle is still in use today. This was the chain pump, a revolutionary piece of engineering that didn't just move water. It moved entire societies forward by unlocking previously unfarmable land. The elegance of the chain pump lies in its beautiful simplicity. Picture a long wooden trough set at an angle with its lower end submerged in a water source. Running through this trough is a continuous loop of linked wooden plates like a giant flat bicycle chain. This chain is turned by a large hand-operated crank, or in more advanced versions, a pedal system or even a water wheel, making the labor far more efficient. As the crank turns, the chain of plates circulates upward through the trough. Each individual plate acts as a miniature scoop. It fits snugly against the wooden walls of the trough, creating a temporary seal. As it moves upward from the water, it carries a precise amount of liquid with it. When the plate reaches the top of its journey, it tips over the apex and gravity does the rest, pouring the water into a waiting irrigation channel. Meanwhile, the empty plate continues its loop back down the other side to begin the process all over again. It's a continuous, flowing conveyor belt for water, a relentless mechanical river flowing uphill. The transformative impact of this invention on Chinese agriculture cannot be overstated. Suddenly, a small team of 2 or 3 workers could operate a pump and move a staggering volume of water, doing the work of dozens of laborers with buckets. This single machine solved one of the greatest puzzles of farming: how to cultivate rugged, sloping land. It allowed farmers to terrace deep into hillsides, creating the breathtaking stepped rice paddies that define regions like Longsheng to this day. They could now lift water from rivers far below to nourish fields high above, maximizing every inch of available land. In the swampy, low-lying deltas, chain pumps were crucial for drainage, pulling excess water out of fields to prevent rot and create the perfect boggy conditions rice plants love. This wasn't just a minor improvement, it was a complete reimagining of what was agriculturally possible, turning previously marginal land into incredibly productive, fertile real estate. This innovation fueled more than just harvests, it fueled expansion and stability. With a more reliable and abundant food supply, populations could grow and communities could thrive in areas once considered too remote or too difficult to farm. The chain pump became a cornerstone of rural life, a shared technology that empowered communities to shape their environment rather than be at its mercy. Its design was so robust and effective that it spread across Asia and later into Europe, with various cultures adapting its core principle for their own needs, from dewatering mines to supplying water to cities. The chain pump stands as a powerful reminder that some of the most profound technologies are not always the most complex, but rather the most perfectly suited to solving a fundamental human problem. It was a simple wooden machine that helped build an empire, one lift of water at a time. From the agricultural fields powered by human ingenuity, we ascend to a pinnacle of engineering ambition that reached literally for the stars. While the chain pump solved earthly problems of sustenance and survival, in the northern Song dynasty capital of Kaifeng, a towering achievement of cosmic ambition was taking shape. This was the brainchild of a brilliant statesman, astronomer, and engineer named Su Song. In the late 11th century, he was tasked with a seemingly impossible mission, reforming the imperial calendar, a matter of critical importance for agriculture, astrology, and the emperor's very mandate to rule. But Su Song's vision extended far beyond simple timekeeping. He conceived and constructed a wooden skyscraper of gears and levers, a 40-foot-tall astronomical clock tower that was, without exaggeration, the most complex machine on Earth for over 200 years. The heart of this colossal timekeeper was its revolutionary driving force, a constant, steady flow of water. At the tower's base sat a massive water wheel, but this was no ordinary mill wheel. Its operation was governed by a genius mechanism known as the celestial balance or the water-powered escapement. This invention was the crucial missing link that would allow mechanical clocks to exist in Europe centuries later. Here's how Su Song's masterpiece worked. Water would drip at a meticulously controlled rate from a series of overflow tanks into a scoop attached to the water wheel's pivot. Once the scoop became heavy enough with water, it would trip a lever, releasing a counterweight that allowed the wheel to rotate forward by precisely one tooth. The scoop would then empty and reset, ready to be filled again. This process created a perfectly regulated, intermittent motion, turning the potential chaos of flowing water into a metronome of celestial accuracy. It was this tick-tock heartbeat of water and weight that drove the entire symphony of gears above. And what a symphony it was! The clock tower was a multi-story marvel of automation and display. At the very top was a giant bronze armillary sphere, a model of the universe used for actual astronomical observations. Through a complex series of gears connected to the central drive shaft, this sphere rotated in perfect sync with the actual heavens, allowing astronomers to track the positions of the sun, moon, and known planets against the backdrop of stars. One floor below was a celestial globe, a representation of the sky that could be used for demonstrations and calculations without needing to be outside. But the most breathtaking spectacle was reserved for the public face of the tower. Here, behind beautifully decorated doors, a procession of mannequins, bells, and gongs would spring to life at precise intervals. On the hour, a wooden figure would emerge, ring a bell, or strike a drum, announcing the time for all to see and hear. Other figures would appear to hold tablets indicating the specific hour and season. The purpose of this incredible machine was far more profound than just a city clock. It was a physical manifestation of the Chinese philosophical concept of the mandate of heaven, a tangible link between the orderly, predictable movements of the cosmos and the orderly, righteous rule of the emperor on earth. By demonstrating a perfect understanding of celestial mechanics, the Song Court was showcasing its divine approval and wisdom. For astronomers, it was an unprecedented computational tool, a mechanical orrery that could predict eclipses and planetary conjunctions with stunning accuracy. For the people of Kaifeng, it was a source of immense civic pride and wonder, a symbol of their dynasty's technological and cultural supremacy. Tragically, the clock tower's glory was short-lived. After Su Song's death, the knowledge to maintain its incredibly intricate mechanisms was lost. Just decades later, the invading Jurchen armies sacked Kaifeng, and the great tower was dismantled, its parts scattered and lost. The precise secrets of its water-powered escapement faded into history, forcing European clockmakers to independently reinvent the same principle much later. The loss of Su Song's tower is one of history's great what-ifs, a stunningly advanced technology that, if its knowledge had been preserved and built upon, could have accelerated the entire world's understanding of mechanics and astronomy by generations. It stands as a hauntingly beautiful monument to a path of technological progress that was brilliantly illuminated, only to be swallowed by the darkness of time and conflict. Now, if the idea of a gear system that can calculate direction or power an astronomical clock seems like pure magic, prepare to have your mind truly opened, because at the core of these marvels lies a single, deceptively simple invention so fundamental that it is quite literally the heart of every modern car. This is the differential gear, a mechanical component that allows two wheels on the same axle to rotate at different speeds. While we often credit its Western reinvention to automotive pioneers in the 19th century, the stunning truth is that Chinese engineers had not only conceptualized it, but are putting it to sophisticated use over 1,000 years earlier. To grasp the sheer genius of this invention, picture a simple cart making a sharp turn. The wheel on the outside of the turn has to travel a longer path and therefore rotate more times than the wheel on the inside. If both wheels were locked to a single, solid axle, this would be impossible, forcing one or both wheels to skid or drag, wasting energy, wearing down materials, and making the turn clumsy and unstable. The differential gear solves this ancient engineering puzzle with elegant mathematical precision. It's a system of three main gears, one central input gear connected to the power source, and two output gears connected to the wheels. The magic happens in the way these gears mesh. When moving straight, the input gear spins the entire assembly as one unit, and both wheels turn at the same speed. But on a turn, the resistance difference between the wheels causes the individual side gears to rotate at different rates relative to each other, automatically allocating more rotational force to the outside wheel. It's a mechanical brain that performs instant analog calculations to ensure smooth and efficient motion. This principle was the hidden powerhouse behind some of China's most astonishing technologies. We already saw it in action with the South-Pointing Chariot, where the differential mechanism translated the difference in wheel rotation into a precise directional correction for the figure on top. But its applications were far more widespread. Historians and engineers now believe similar differential gear systems were integral to the complex clockwork inside Su Song's astronomical clock tower. They would have been essential for translating the single, steady power from the water wheel into the multiple, varied rotational speeds needed to drive the armillary sphere, the celestial globe, and the time-announcing puppets, all moving in their correct, synchronized cycles. This wasn't just a gear, it was the key to creating a mechanical universe, a way to distribute and modulate power with a sophistication that wouldn't be seen again until the Industrial Revolution. The profound implication of finding differential gears in ancient China is that it reveals a level of abstract mechanical thinking that was centuries, if not a millennium, ahead of the rest of the world. It demonstrates that Chinese engineers weren't just building devices, they were mastering the core principles of kinematics, the geometry of motion itself. They understood that machinery could be designed to solve mathematical problems physically, to perform calculations through the interaction of precisely carved wood and bronze. This loss of knowledge represents one of history's greatest technological hiccups. Imagine if this understanding had continued to develop and spread, if the engineering momentum of the Song dynasty had never been interrupted. The entire timeline of mechanical automation and transportation might have been accelerated beyond our comprehension. The differential gear is a quiet, unassuming testament to a path of innovation that was brilliantly illuminated, proving that the ancient world was capable of technological leaps we are only just beginning to rediscover. While we marvel at the intricate gear systems and clockwork automata, none of it would have been possible without a foundation of absolute mastery over the very materials that made them metal. The technological leaps of ancient China were forged in fire, born from a metallurgical prowess so advanced that it rivaled and often surpassed techniques found anywhere else in the world for centuries. This wasn't just about making tools, it was about bending the elements to human will, achieving perfection in bronze, iron, and steel through a combination of artistic vision and ruthless empirical science. The methods they developed were so sophisticated, so precisely controlled, that they remain the subject of intense study and admiration by modern materials engineers. Consider the breathtaking beauty and lethal functionality of the Chinese jian, the straight, double-edged sword often revered as the gentleman of weapons. To the untrained eye, it appears as a single, flawless piece of steel, but hidden within its core is a secret of profound ingenuity, pattern welding. This was not merely decoration. It was a high-stakes engineering solution to one of metallurgy's oldest dilemmas, the inherent conflict between hardness and flexibility. A sword that is too hard will hold a razor-sharp edge but shatter like glass in a fierce clash. A sword that is too flexible will bend and stay bent, becoming useless. Chinese smiths solved this by becoming material mixologists, expertly forge welding layers of iron and steel with different carbon contents together into a single billet. This billet was then folded, twisted, and drawn out over and over, sometimes hundreds of times, creating a microscopic laminate structure within the blade. The final product was a sword of astonishing resilience, a core of softer, flexible iron that could absorb tremendous impact, sheathed in layers of ultra-hard, high-carbon steel that could be honed to a devastating edge. The distinctive, swirling patterns that emerged on the surface were like a fingerprint of this incredibly labor-intensive process, a guaranteed mark of a weapon that was both a work of art and a masterpiece of functional design. But this command over metal began even earlier, with a bronze casting technology so unique and effective that it defined the apex of the Bronze Age in China. While the Mediterranean world relied on the lost wax method, Chinese foundry masters perfected an approach called piece mold casting. This technique was fundamentally different. Instead of sculpting a master model in wax and then destroying it to create a one-time use mold, Chinese artisans would craft the intended object, an intricate ritual vessel, a cauldron, or a bell out of clay. This model was then carefully sectioned, and each section was used to create a corresponding negative mold piece, also made of fired clay. These mold pieces could be reassembled like a three-dimensional puzzle around a solid clay core, leaving a precise gap between the core and the mold walls into which the molten bronze would be poured. The genius of this system was its reusability and its precision. The mold pieces could be stored and used again to create identical objects, enabling a level of serial production unheard of elsewhere. Furthermore, intricate designs and inscriptions were carved directly into the negative spaces of the mold pieces themselves, resulting in bronze work adorned with breathtakingly sharp, crisp detail that has never truly been surpassed. This method allowed for the casting of massive, complex objects like the legendary Humuwu Ding, a rectangular ritual cauldron weighing over 1,800 pounds, a feat of foundry work that stands as a monument to ancient industrial capability. However, the ultimate expression of this metallurgical genius was the quest for the perfect steel. By the Han Dynasty, Chinese ironmasters had developed a revolutionary furnace design that would change the world, the blast furnace. These were sophisticated structures, often built into hillsides to take advantage of natural drafts, capable of reaching temperatures previously unimaginable. But their real innovation was a twin-tube system of bellows, often powered by water wheels, that forced a continuous blast of air into the furnace chamber. This constant supply of oxygen dramatically intensified the combustion, burning off more impurities from the iron ore and allowing for the complete liquefaction of the metal. This produced vast quantities of liquid pig iron, which could be cast directly into molds for tools, weapons, and cookware, a form of mass production that was centuries ahead of European methods, where iron was still being worked as a spongy solid in bloomeries. The real alchemy, however, came next in the transformation of this brittle, high-carbon cast iron into durable, workable steel. Chinese metallurgists perfected two groundbreaking techniques. The first, fining, involved remelting the cast iron in an open hearth furnace while workers manually stirred it with long iron poles. This process, eerily similar to the Bessemer process developed in the West in the 19th century, exposed the molten metal to oxygen, which burned off excess carbon, converting it into malleable wrought iron or mild steel. The second and even more advanced technique was co-fusion. This involved something truly brilliant, placing pieces of brittle cast iron and soft wrought iron together in a sealed crucible and heating them until they melted and fused. The carbon from the cast iron would diffuse evenly throughout the wrought iron, creating a homogeneous medium carbon steel of exceptionally consistent and high quality. This ability to reliably and deliberately control the carbon content of their metal was the holy grail of ancient metallurgy. It gave Chinese smiths a material that could be tuned for specific purposes, from the springy steel of a carriage suspension to the hardened edge of a legendary sword, laying the industrial foundation for an empire. This was not merely craftsmanship, it was a systematic, scientific pursuit of material perfection, a silent revolution in the forge that powered every other technological wonder the ancient Chinese world would produce. While the master smiths of ancient China were achieving miracles of metallurgy in the forge, applying that same spirit of calculated power and precision on a truly monumental scale gave rise to one of the most fearsome war machines ever conceived. If you were a defender atop a city wall in the medieval period, few sights would strike more terror into your heart than the slow, deliberate assembly of a Chinese counterweight trebuchet. This was not a simple catapult, it was a weapon of calculated physics and psychological warfare, a lever so massive it could hurl projectiles the weight of a small car with terrifying accuracy, turning the strongest fortifications into rubble. The fundamental leap of the counterweight trebuchet was its complete independence from human muscle. Earlier torsion and traction catapults relied on teams of men pulling ropes to generate force, a method that was inconsistent, exhausting, and limited in power. Chinese engineers revolutionized siege warfare by replacing that human effort with gravity itself. The machine's power came from an enormous box or container filled with tons of earth, stones, or sand, mounted on the short end of a gigantic pivoting beam. The true genius was in the mathematical calibration of this system. Engineers had to perform precise calculations to determine the ideal weight of the countermass, the length ratio between the short and long arms of the beam, and the exact placement of the pivot axle. A heavier counterweight or a longer throwing arm would increase range and power, but also placed immense stress on the machine's structure. This was not guesswork, it was applied physics, a meticulous balancing of forces to achieve a specific destructive result. This engineering mastery is perfectly illustrated by the account of the Mongol sieges of Xiangyong and Fancheng in the 13th century. Faced with seemingly impregnable Song dynasty fortifications, the Mongols turned to two Muslim engineers from Persia who designed and built massive counterweight trebuchets. However, historical records strongly suggest these engineers were working from Chinese principles and designs, possibly even under the direction of Chinese siege specialists within the Mongol armies. These machines, which some chroniclers called the Crouching Tiger Trebuchet, or more famously in the West, the Muslim counterweight trebuchet, were likely refined versions of an existing Chinese technology. The modular design was key to their success. Components were prefabricated behind the lines, transported to the siege site, and then assembled with startling speed, often under the cover of mobile screens that protected the workers from arrows and bolts. This ability to construct such complex artillery on site was a logistical and tactical nightmare for defenders. The effect was apocalyptic. These engines could launch a diverse and horrifying array of payloads. Massive cut stone balls were used to pound walls and towers, methodically cracking masonry and undermining structures with repeated hammer-like blows. But they could also be loaded with incendiary bundles, creating fiery comets that arced over the walls to set entire cities ablaze. In a chilling early form of biological warfare, trebuchets were also used to lob diseased carcasses over the walls, attempting to sicken the population and garrison within. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical destruction. The groaning of the winches, the thunderous crash of the counterweight dropping, and the shriek of the projectile in flight created a relentless cycle of terror and demolition that could break the will of the staunchest defenders. The fall of the twin cities of Xianyang and Fancheng after a prolonged siege was a pivotal moment, demonstrating that no wall, no matter how high or thick, was safe from the relentless, gravity-powered logic of the counterweight trebuchet. It was a machine that didn't just break gates, it reshaped the very map of power, proving that in warfare, the masterful application of science could conquer even the most formidable defenses. While the thunderous crash of trebuchets demonstrated the power of applied physics above ground, an even more profound technological revolution was taking place deep beneath the Earth's surface, driven by a relentless pursuit of a precious crystalline resource, salt. In the fertile Sichuan Basin, a region rich in brine springs and natural gas seeps, ancient Chinese innovators embarked on an engineering quest that would eventually lead them to invent deep drilling, a technology so advanced that it wouldn't be matched in the West for over 1,000 years. Their goal was to tap into subterranean brine pools to boost salt production, but in the process, they would accidentally unlock a powerful new energy source and create an industrial complex that was utterly unprecedented in the ancient world. The challenge was immense. Surface brine springs were becoming exhausted, and the richest deposits lay hidden hundreds and eventually thousands of feet below layers of hard rock. The solution they developed, known as percussion drilling, was a masterpiece of persistence and simple mechanics. First, crews would erect a towering derrick, often over 180 feet tall, constructed from lashed-together bamboo poles. This flexible, resilient structure could sway with the wind and absorb the shocks of the drilling process. At the top of this derrick, a massive iron drill bit, shaped like a giant chisel and weighing several hundred pounds, was suspended by a hemp rope. The real ingenuity was in the driving mechanism. A team of men would jump on and off a wooden lever like a seesaw, causing the bit to be lifted and then dropped over and over again, pounding relentlessly into the earth. It was a slow, grueling process, but this relentless percussion was incredibly effective at pulverizing even the hardest rock. But simply pounding a hole wasn't enough. The true genius of the system lay in a suite of ingenious tools designed to solve every problem encountered a mile underground. As the drill bit chewed through the strata, the borehole had to be kept clear. For this, they developed a hollow bamboo tube with a one-way leather flap valve at the bottom, an ancient version of a modern baler. This tool was lowered into the hole, and when it hit the slurry of mud and rock fragments at the bottom, the pressure would force the flap open, filling the tube. When it was hauled back up, the flap would seal shut, trapping the debris inside to be emptied at the surface. When the drillers inevitably hit pockets of high-pressure natural gas or water, they faced the danger of a blowout. Their solution was to lower a long, hollow tube of bamboo, sealed with a mixture of hemp and clay, down the hole to act as a casing, effectively creating a controlled channel through the unstable layer. Perhaps the most astonishing tool was the skewer, a specialized implement used to fish out broken tools or debris from the bottom of the well, a task that required incredible skill and patience. A single borehole could take a team of experienced drillers a generation to complete, inching their way downward at a rate of perhaps a few feet per month, their progress measured in years of rhythmic, percussive labor. The payoff for this decades-long investment could be spectacular. The deepest of these wells, drilled during the Song dynasty, reached depths of over 3,000 feet, a staggering achievement that is still difficult to comprehend. At these depths, they didn't just find the brine they were searching for. They often struck fire wells, tapping into vast reservoirs of natural gas. Faced with this dangerous and unpredictable force, the drillers once again proved their brilliance. They couldn't let the gas explode, and they couldn't simply cap the well and waste it. Instead, they engineered the world's first natural gas distribution system. They capped the wellhead with a large, hollowed-out stone and fitted it with a long, jointed bamboo pipeline. The joints were sealed meticulously with a putty made from tung oil and lime, creating a surprisingly airtight conduit. This pipeline would then carry the gas, sometimes for miles across the countryside, to its final destination, the salt evaporation pans. Here, the entire operation came together in a breathtaking display of integrated industrial energy use. The bamboo pipelines terminated at rows of large, flat iron pans filled with brine, either pumped from the same well or transported from other sources. The natural gas was channeled through smaller bamboo tubes and lit, producing a steady, controllable flame that burned day and night under the pans. This method was far superior to burning precious wood or coal, which was expensive and difficult to transport in large quantities. The gas provided a consistent, intense heat that allowed for the highly efficient and large-scale production of salt. This operation in ancient Sichuan represents the first known use of natural gas as an industrial fuel in human history, a closed-loop system where they drilled for one resource and harnessed a second, more powerful one to process it. It was a sustainable energy solution on a massive scale, an innovation that transformed salt production from a local craft into a major industrial enterprise, fueling the economy of an empire and lighting a fire under the cauldrons of progress centuries before the rest of the world even dreamed it was possible. Yet for all the brute force industrial power of deep drilling and gas-fired salt works, another innovation was quietly revolutionizing the landscape in a far more gentle, though no less impactful way. While some technologies were designed to conquer and extract, others were crafted to nurture and sustain. This brings us to a machine that became the very heartbeat of rural China, an elegant solution to the most fundamental of human needs, watering the fields that fed a civilization. We've already glimpsed the basic chain pump, but its evolution into the square-pallet chain pump, particularly its foot-powered operation, transformed it from a useful tool into an icon of agricultural efficiency that supercharged rice cultivation and shaped the very hydrology of the empire. The design improvements of the square-pallet chain pump were a masterclass in ergonomic and material efficiency. Earlier versions might have been turned by a hand crank, which was still laborious and limited the power a single person could apply. The breakthrough was the addition of a large, rotating treadwheel, often constructed from a spoked wooden frame with foot pedals made of bamboo. This simple change leveraged the strongest muscles in the human body, the legs and core, allowing a single operator to generate far more torque with less fatigue. Sometimes a wooden railing was mounted above the wheel for the operator to hold onto, turning the act of pumping into a smooth, full-body motion akin to climbing a continuous staircase. This freed up the hands, making the operation safer and more stable. The core mechanism, however, remained its genius, the endless loop of square wooden pallets connected by links, moving snugly through a rectangular trough. The square shape of the pallets was crucial, as it created a much tighter seal against the wooden walls of the trough than a round chain could, drastically reducing water slippage and maximizing the volume lifted with each revolution. Constructed almost entirely from wood and bamboo materials that were abundant, renewable, and easily repaired by local craftsmen, the pump was a testament to sustainable, appropriate technology. Its gentle creaking and the rhythmic splash of water became the soundtrack to life in countless rural communities. The impact of this efficient water-lifting technology on rice cultivation cannot be overstated. Rice is a crop that thrives in controlled, shallow flooding, requiring a constant and reliable supply of water at every stage of its growth. With the foot-powered chain pump, a farming family could manage water with a precision that was previously impossible. They could flood their paddies to the exact depth needed to suppress weeds, protect young shoots, and then carefully drain them as harvest approached. This reliability led to dramatically increased yields and, just as importantly, allowed for the expansion of rice agriculture into new territories. Vast, rolling hillsides were transformed into the breathtaking tapestry of terraces we admire today, each level fed by water pumped from the river valleys far below. The pump made this vertical farming possible. It was the engine that allowed human ambition to sculpt entire mountains into fertile, productive land. Beyond watering individual fields, the proliferation of these pumps became the linchpin of large-scale hydraulic engineering projects. Chinese water management was never just about irrigation. It was a continuous battle against two equally destructive forces, drought and flood. The chain pump was a versatile weapon in both campaigns. In times of drought, networks of pumps could be deployed along riverbanks and canals to lift the last precious inches of water into irrigation channels, stretching a limited supply to save the harvest. Conversely, in times of catastrophic flooding, the same technology was repurposed for drainage. When low-lying fields and villages were submerged, pumps were set up to reverse the flow, lifting water out of the flooded areas and back into the main river channels. This dual-purpose functionality made it an indispensable tool for the state-sponsored public works projects that defined Chinese dynastic power. The ability to control water on such a massive scale was a primary reason for China's remarkable political and demographic endurance. It stabilized the food supply, preventing the famines that could topple empires. The rhythmic stepping of farmers on their treadwheels was not just an agricultural activity. It was an act of civic resilience, a daily, personal contribution to the monumental effort of holding a vast and hydrologically tempestuous landscape in a productive, life-sustaining balance. This incredible progress in agriculture and industry was all made possible by the humble yet indispensable medium that recorded its every detail: paper. But to think of ancient Chinese paper as merely a surface for writing is to miss a vast world of material science innovation. While Kai Lun of the Eastern Han Dynasty is rightly celebrated for systematizing the use of tree bark and rags to create a more consistent and scalable writing material, the artisans who followed him embarked on a centuries-long quest of experimentation. They transformed basic paper pulp into an astonishing array of specialized, high-performance materials, each engineered for a unique and often surprising purpose. This wasn't just papermaking, it was applied chemistry and textiles, creating products that were waterproof, brilliantly colorful, and so durable they could challenge modern materials. One of the most pressing problems for any paper-based culture is its inherent vulnerability. A sudden rainstorm could wipe out official records, and important documents stored in damp conditions would quickly succumb to mold and rot. Chinese papermakers ingeniously solved this by turning to nature's own waterproofing agents. They developed methods of treating paper with natural oils, most commonly derived from the tung tree or from soybeans. The paper would be immersed in or brushed with these oils, which would then permeate the fibrous mat, filling the microscopic pores that would normally absorb water. Once dried and cured, the result was a sleek, glossy sheet that was effectively impervious to moisture. This wasn't just a novelty, it was a critical technology for everyday life. Waterproof paper was used to make sturdy, reusable oil paper umbrellas that sheltered people from the elements for centuries. It was fashioned into windows that were far more affordable and versatile than glass or parchment, letting in light while keeping out wind and rain. Perhaps most importantly, it was used to wrap and protect precious goods, from medicines to ceremonial objects, ensuring they survived long journeys across rivers and through humid climates. This simple treatment elevated paper from a fragile medium of communication to a robust, functional material for construction and preservation. Beyond mere utility, Chinese artisans also mastered the art of transforming paper into a vibrant medium for artistic expression. They developed a sophisticated palette of colored papers that were integral to religious ceremonies, government administration, and high art. Colors were not merely decorative, they held deep symbolic meaning. Yellow paper dyed with the pollen of the sophora flower or turmeric was reserved exclusively for the emperor, as yellow was the imperial color representing the center of the earth and ultimate power. Documents written on any other color would have been unthinkable for court use. For public notices and announcements, a bold vermilion red paper colored with cinnabar was often used to convey urgency and importance. Buddhist sutras were frequently transcribed onto deep indigo or black paper, with the text itself inscribed in silver or gold ink, creating a stunning visual representation of sacred wisdom shining through the darkness of ignorance. The techniques for achieving these brilliant, lasting colors were complex, involving the use of mordants, metallic salts that helped the natural dyes bond permanently with the paper fibers to prevent fading. This creation of a spectrum of colored papers established a visual language of hierarchy and purpose, where the medium itself communicated the message before a single character was even written. However, the absolute pinnacle of this papermaking craft was the development of extraordinarily strong and durable papers, the undisputed master of which was paper made from the inner bark of the mulberry tree. Known as pie, this was not the crumbly, yellowing paper we might associate with old documents. It was a tough, flexible, and incredibly long-lasting material. The process of creating it was a testament to patience and skill. The inner bark was harvested, soaked, and beaten for hours to separate the long, tough fibers. These superior fibers were the key to its strength. When formed into a sheet, they created a dense, interlocking mesh that could withstand incredible stress. The most famous demonstration of its durability was its ability to be folded back and upon itself thousands of times without tearing or wearing through. This made it the material of choice for important legal documents, land deeds, and contracts that needed to survive for generations, handled repeatedly without falling apart. Its strength and flexibility also made it the perfect material for making clothing, armor, and even bedding, offering a surprisingly resilient and breathable alternative to heavier textiles. In its toughest forms, mulberry paper could be lacquered and shaped into boxes, helmets, and ceremonial masks. This transformation of a simple tree bark into a material that could bear the weight of law, deflect the elements, and endure the passage of time stands as one of the most profound and overlooked material science achievements of the ancient world, a hidden strength that supported the entire framework of Chinese civilization. But if you thought water-powered clocks and directional chariots represented the peak of ancient automation, prepare to be utterly enchanted by a technology designed purely for wonder and delight. Beyond the practical machines that measured time and irrigated fields, Chinese engineers applied their genius to a realm of pure spectacle, creating breathtaking mechanical theaters that brought stories to life with a magic that felt almost supernatural. These were not simple toys, they were intricate, large-scale automata, often housed within magnificent cabinets or entire rooms, where an entire cast of puppets would perform elaborate scenes from mythology, history, and daily life, all moving with flawless precision without a human hand ever touching them. The driving force behind many of these astounding displays was the same ingenious principle that powered Su Song's clock: hydraulics. Engineers designed complex networks of water wheels, gears, and levers, where a constant flow of water would set the entire performance in motion. In some of the most advanced designs, they even utilized the unique properties of liquid mercury. Mercury's high density and smooth, consistent flow allowed it to act as a powerful and reliable hydraulic fluid within sealed systems, transferring force to trigger levers and rotate gears with a mesmerizing liquid smoothness. This choice of medium reveals a deep understanding of fluid dynamics, using the relentless, predictable power of displaced liquid to become the unseen puppeteer behind the drama. One of the most celebrated masters of this art was the Tang Dynasty engineer and inventor Huang Gun, who astounded the court of Emperor Tang Xuanzong with his water-powered pavilion of automatic entertainments. Historical accounts describe a multi-story wooden structure, a mechanized palace within a palace. As water filled reservoirs and turned hidden wheels, the entire scene would whir to life. Doors would swing open on their own to reveal articulated figures. Mechanical musicians would strum stringed instruments and strike drums in a perfectly timed orchestra. Acrobats would somersault across platforms, and dancers would twirl in an endless, graceful loop. The centerpiece was often a procession of figurines representing officials coming to pay homage to the emperor, a moving tableau that reinforced the divine order and majesty of the court itself. These performances were more than just entertainment. They were a powerful demonstration of the dynasty's technological and cultural sophistication, a kinetic sculpture that blurred the line between art and engineering. The scenes they depicted were drawn from a rich cultural tapestry. An audience might witness an automated reenactment of a famous battle from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, with tiny cavalrymen charging and retreating. Another might portray a celestial journey from Taoist mythology, with figures riding clouds across a painted backdrop. Yet another might capture a slice of idealized rural life, with farmers tilling fields, oxen pulling plows, and water wheels turning, a self-referential celebration of the very technologies that made the spectacle possible. The layers of meaning were deep, offering philosophical commentary, moral lessons, and imperial propaganda, all delivered through the captivating medium of automated motion. The creation of these theaters required a fusion of multiple disciplines that is staggering to contemplate. The inventor had to be a master mechanic, designing gear trains with precisely calculated ratios to ensure each figure moved at the correct speed and in perfect synchronization with all the others. They had to be a sculptor and an artist, crafting figures that were not only functional but also beautifully expressive. They had to be a playwright and a director, choreographing complex sequences of movement that told a coherent and engaging story. And finally, they had to be a showman, understanding how to build anticipation and deliver a payoff that would leave the audience in a state of awe. The loss of these mechanical theaters is one of history's great cultural tragedies. Unlike a stone wall or a bronze vessel, their delicate clockwork was incredibly vulnerable to decay, rust, and the ravages of time. They were, by their nature, ephemeral wonders, designed to astonish a single generation before vanishing, leaving behind only written accounts that read like descriptions of magic. They stand as a poignant reminder that the height of ancient innovation was often dedicated not just to survival or conquest, but to the pure, joyful, and profoundly human pursuit of wonder. While the court marveled at mechanical wonders and forges roared with industrial might, a much quieter yet equally brilliant revolution was unfolding in the sun-drenched citrus groves of southern China. Here, farmers faced a relentless enemy not with steel or fire, but with a profound understanding of the natural world itself. They pioneered a form of biological pest control so sophisticated that it wouldn't be formally recognized by Western science for over 2 millennia. Their weapon of choice wasn't a pesticide but a predator, and their strategy involved building tiny, intricate bridges to invite them in. The problem was the citrus ant, Ocophila smaragdina, a large, aggressive, and territorially fierce insect. While these ants might have been a nuisance to anyone else, ancient Chinese farmers observed their behavior with a keen, empirical eye. They noticed that groves where these ants naturally built their nests suffered far less damage from foliage-eating beetles, caterpillars, and other insects that could decimate a harvest. The ants were voracious hunters, patrolling the leaves and branches of their chosen tree with a militant efficiency, attacking and dismembering any other insect that dared to invade their territory. Instead of trying to eradicate the ants, these innovative growers asked a revolutionary question: how could they recruit them? The answer was a system of active ecosystem management that feels astonishingly modern. The farmers' goal was to ensure every single tree in their orchard had a thriving, protective colony of these guardian ants. But ants are ground-dwelling creatures, and a gap of open space between the canopy of one tree and the next represented an impassable moat. An ant colony on one tree was effectively trapped, unable to spread its protective influence to its neighbors. To solve this, the farmers became ecological engineers, constructing tiny infrastructure projects. They would take slender bamboo rods or strips and carefully tie them between the branches of adjacent citrus trees, creating a network of aerial bridges that connected the entire orchard into one continuous, accessible territory. This simple act transformed the grove's entire dynamic. The ants, always driven to expand their foraging grounds, would eagerly explore these new pathways. A colony from a single tree could now spread systematically throughout the entire plantation, establishing satellite nests and patrol routes. The farmers actively facilitated this migration, even going so far as to purchase nests of these valuable ants from specialized collectors in other regions to introduce them to new groves. They nurtured and protected their 6-legged employees, understanding that a healthy ant population was the best guarantee of a healthy crop. This wasn't a casual practice. It was a refined, deliberate agricultural technology documented in learned texts like Zhang Heng's Plants of the Southern Regions from the 3rd century, which details the method and even notes that fruits from these protected trees were of superior quality and fetched a higher price at market. The sheer brilliance of this system lies in its elegant, sustainable logic. It required no manufactured chemicals, created no toxic runoff, and harmed no beneficial insects other than the target pests. The ants were a self-replicating, self-sustaining workforce that required no payment beyond the pests they consumed. They provided round-the-clock security, their effectiveness increasing as their colony grew. This ancient practice represents one of the earliest and most successful examples of humanity harnessing a complex ecological relationship for its own benefit, demonstrating a holistic worldview that saw humans not as separate from nature, but as active, intelligent participants within it. While the modern world struggles with the unintended consequences of chemical pesticides, these ancient farmers had already perfected a sustainable solution, proving that sometimes the most advanced technology isn't a tool you build, but a partner you befriend. Yet for all the ingenuity of recruiting 6-legged guardians to protect their groves, Chinese agricultural innovators were simultaneously perfecting a machine that would transform the very foundation of farming, the act of planting itself. For millennia, the universal method of sowing was broadcast seeding, a process as wasteful as it was ancient. A farmer would walk across a plowed field, clutching a basket of precious seed, and with a sweeping arc of the arm would scatter the grains across the soil. It was a hopeful gesture, but one plagued by terrible inefficiency. The wind would carry much of the seed away, birds would feast on what lay exposed on the surface, and the resulting plants would emerge in a chaotic, overcrowded tangle. They would compete fiercely for sunlight, water, and nutrients, stunting each other's growth and creating a paradise for pests and disease. The survival of a civilization depended on this gamble, with a staggering portion of every harvest needing to be set aside just to replant the following season, never making it to the table. The multi-tube seed drill, a technological leap that would not appear in Europe until the 18th century, eliminated this gamble with breathtaking precision. Imagine a wooden cart or plow-like frame, equipped with a hopper to hold a large supply of seed. From the bottom of this hopper descended not one, but several, often 3 to 5 hollow bamboo tubes or funnels. Each tube led to a simple, yet brilliantly effective, cutting and depositing mechanism at ground level, often a small iron share or coulter that would open a neat furrow in the soil. As the drill was pulled forward by an ox, a rotating wooden axle or a small wheel, bristling with pegs, would brush against the base of the hopper. This regulated, metered motion would jostle the seeds, causing them to trickle down the individual tubes at a steady, controlled rate, delivering them directly into the freshly opened furrows. A following blade or chain would then sweep soil back over the seeds, covering them to a uniform depth and protecting them from the elements. The impact of this shift from chaotic scattering to orderly placement was nothing short of revolutionary. For the first time, every single precious seed was given its best possible chance at life. Planted at an optimal, consistent depth, they germinated reliably. Spaced evenly in neat, parallel rows, the young seedlings had room to thrive without competition, allowing for robust root systems and stronger stalks. This orderly arrangement also made the back-breaking work of weeding and cultivation infinitely easier, as farmers could now use simple tools to run between the clearly defined rows without damaging the crops. The efficiency gains were astronomical. Historical analyses suggest that drill planting could reduce seed waste by up to 90% compared to broadcast methods. This meant a farm could produce the same yield using only a fraction of the seed, or use its entire seed stock to plant a vastly larger area. This single machine effectively multiplied the productive capacity of every acre of land and every basket of seed grain, creating a surplus that could support larger populations and fuel economic growth. But the true sophistication of the Chinese seed drill went beyond simple metering. The design often incorporated separate, partitioned hoppers or multiple tubes that allowed for the simultaneous planting of different types of crops. This enabled the practice of intercropping, where a farmer might plant rows of wheat alongside rows of legumes. This was more than just efficient space usage, it was applied agro-science. The legumes, through a symbiotic relationship with bacteria in their roots, would naturally fix nitrogen from the air into the soil, acting as a natural fertilizer for the nutrient-hungry wheat growing beside it. This clever combination, facilitated by the drill, reduced the need for fallowing land to restore its fertility and represented a sustainable farming practice that modern agriculture is only now rediscovering. The multi-tube seed drill was far more than a labor-saving device. It was the key that unlocked systematic, scientific farming, transforming agriculture from a ritual of hope into a predictable engine of plenty. Yet for all the agricultural and mechanical genius we've explored, some of ancient China's most enduring technological triumphs were achieved not in the forge or the field, but in the artist's studio, transforming a simple tree sap into a material of almost supernatural resilience and beauty. This was the art of advanced lacquerware, a chemical and aesthetic marvel that produced objects so durable they could survive millennia buried in wet, acidic soil and emerge looking as if they were crafted yesterday. To create a single lacquer cup was to embark on a process that was equal parts alchemy, meditation, and supreme craftsmanship, a testament to a culture that valued permanence and perfection. The entire journey began with a humble source, the sap of the lacquer tree, Toxicodendron vernicifluum. Harvesting this raw material was a dangerous and skilled task in itself. Tappers would make careful incisions in the tree's bark, collecting the viscous, grayish sap that oozed out. But this substance was far from harmless. It contained urushiol, the same skin-irritating compound found in poison ivy, and could cause severe allergic reactions in those who handled it without protection. This treacherous beginning only added to the material's mystique and value. Once collected, the raw sap had to be meticulously filtered to remove any impurities like bits of bark or leaves. It was then gently stirred for hours, sometimes days, in a process that incorporated oxygen and catalyzed a chemical transformation, slowly turning the gray liquid into a rich, translucent deep brown, the first step in its journey to becoming an impervious coating. The true magic, however, lay in the application. Lacquer does not dry through evaporation like paint. It cures through a chemical reaction with humidity, polymerizing into a rock-hard, insoluble plastic. To build an object strong enough to last forever, an artisan couldn't simply slap on a thick coat. They had to apply dozens, sometimes over 100, whisper-thin layers onto a carefully prepared core, which could be made of wood, cloth, or even molded leather. Each layer had to be applied in a dedicated dust-free room with precisely controlled temperature and humidity to ensure proper curing. After each application, the piece was left to harden for hours, sometimes a full day, before the next layer could be added. A single piece could take months or even an entire year to complete. This was a technology of profound patience where time itself was a primary ingredient. But for the imperial court and the most elite patrons, a flawless black or red finish was only the beginning. The highest form of this art was mother-of-pearl inlay, a technique that reached its zenith during the Song dynasty. Artisans would take slivers of iridescent shell from freshwater mussels or sea snails, a material known as luodion, and painstakingly cut them into intricate shapes depicting flowers, birds, landscapes, or scenes from poetry. Using a fine needle and adhesive, they would then position each tiny fragment onto the uncured lacquer surface, building up a breathtaking mosaic. After the design was set, the artist would apply more layers of ultra-clear lacquer over the entire inlay, completely encapsulating it. The final and most dramatic step was the polishing. Using ever finer abrasives from charcoal to fine ash and finally just the palm of the hand, the artisan would slowly wear down the top layers of lacquer until the surface was perfectly smooth and flush, revealing the mother-of-pearl shimmering mysteriously from within the depths of the object. The effect was mesmerizing, a scene that seemed to float in a perfect, glossy void protected for eternity. The result of this unimaginable effort was more than just art. It was a perfect marriage of form and function. A finished lacquer vessel was completely waterproof, making it ideal for storing wine, food, and precious documents. It was highly resistant to acids, alkalines, and extreme temperatures, allowing it to withstand the rigors of daily use and ceremonial feasts alike. Most remarkably, it was incredibly strong yet lightweight, a combination that made it perfect for everything from lavish cosmetic boxes and dining sets to robust traveling trunks and military equipment. The archaeological record is filled with stunning proof of its durability. Han Dynasty lacquerware excavated from tombs that have been waterlogged for 2,000 years emerges with its colors still vibrant and its surface still mirror smooth, while the wooden coffins around them have long since turned to mud. This was a technology designed to defy time, to carry the identity and culture of its creators across centuries, and in its silent, gleaming perfection, it succeeded spectacularly. But beyond the serene beauty of lacquerware and the patient rhythms of the farm, ancient Chinese ingenuity also took to the skies, transforming a simple child's toy into an instrument of war and intelligence. We often think of kites as colorful diversions dancing on the wind, but in the hands of ancient Chinese military strategists, they became sophisticated tools for gaining the ultimate advantage, the high ground. Long before the invention of powered flight or hot air balloons, Chinese commanders were harnessing the wind to lift their eyes high above the battlefield. turning the kite into the world's first unmanned aerial reconnaissance platform. The scale and design of these military kites were a far cry from the delicate paper diamonds we know today. Historical accounts describe kites of truly enormous proportions, constructed from tough, resilient materials like silk or heavy oiled paper stretched over a rigid bamboo frame. These were not built for graceful acrobatics. They were engineered for stability and payload capacity in often challenging conditions. Their shapes were optimized for strength and lift, with some designs resembling large rectangular wings or even elaborate multi-celled structures to distribute stress. The cords used to control them were not simple string but thick, sturdy ropes made from braided bamboo fibers or silk, capable of withstanding immense tension. The engineering challenge was immense, requiring a deep understanding of aerodynamics, material science, and structural integrity to create a kite that could not only fly in strong winds but also carry a significant weight without tearing itself apart. This lifting power was put to a variety of crucial military applications. One of the most straightforward yet vital uses was for distance measurement. Siege warfare required knowing the exact distance to a city's walls to effectively position catapults and trebuchets. To achieve this, soldiers would fly a kite directly over the enemy fortification. By letting out the cord at a consistent angle and measuring the immense length of rope used, they could employ basic trigonometry to calculate the precise distance to the wall with an accuracy that was impossible to achieve from ground level. This transformed siege planning from a game of guesswork into a precise mathematical operation. Beyond measurement, kites served as a highly effective and versatile signaling system. In an era before radios, coordinating the movements of large armies across smoke-choked, chaotic battlefields was incredibly difficult. A large kite flying in a prearranged position or pattern could be seen for miles by different units. The color of the kite, its shape, or even a series of deliberate dips and tugs on the line could convey complex commands: order to advance, to retreat, to shift flank, or to signal that an ambush was ready. This silent, visual language in the sky allowed for real-time tactical adjustments that could decide the outcome of an entire engagement, all while remaining indecipherable to an enemy who lacked the code. The most audacious application, however, was for direct human observation. There are numerous accounts from the Tang and Song dynasties of kites so large and powerful they could lift a fully grown man into the air. This was an incredibly dangerous undertaking, requiring immense courage from the observer, who would be harnessed into a specially designed seat suspended beneath the kite. Once aloft, he would have a breathtaking and terrifying bird's-eye view of the enemy's dispositions. He could count troop numbers, identify command tents, spot the movement of reserve forces, and map out defensive weaknesses, relaying this information back to the ground via flag signals or by written notes dropped in weighted tubes. For the first time in history, a general could see over a hill or behind a wall, rendering the enemy's attempts at concealment and deception utterly useless. This ability to literally rise above the fog of war provided an intelligence advantage that was nothing short of revolutionary, a silent sentinel in the sky that changed the very nature of military strategy. Yet for all their mastery of the battlefield and the skies, one of ancient China's most personal and enduring contributions to daily life focused on a simple, universal human experience: the desire for clean teeth and fresh breath. While many ancient cultures used chew sticks, cloths, or abrasive powders to clean their teeth, it was in 15th century China that a tool we would instantly recognize today was invented: the first true bristle toothbrush. This innovation emerged from a sophisticated understanding of hygiene and a culture that placed a high value on personal grooming and ritual purity. Imagine the scene: an artisan, perhaps in the bustling capital of Nanjing during the Ming Dynasty, taking a handle of bamboo or bone and carefully drilling a series of tiny holes into one end. Then taking stiff, coarse bristles harvested from the back of a northern hog, They would secure small tufts into each hole, using a thin wire or tough animal sinew to bind them tightly in place. The result was a dedicated, effective tool designed for one purpose only: to clean the teeth with a precision and efficiency that had never been achieved before. The choice of materials was no accident. Hog bristles, particularly those taken from the colder climates of northern China and Siberia, were ideal for the task. They were firm enough to scrub away food particles and plaque, yet possessed a natural flexibility that allowed them to conform to the contours of the teeth without causing excessive damage to the gums. The handles, often made from bamboo, were not only readily available and inexpensive, but also had natural antimicrobial properties that helped keep the tool somewhat hygienic. This invention didn't exist in a vacuum. It was part of a broader suite of dental hygiene practices. People would often dip their new brush into pastes or powders made from a variety of ingredients. These early toothpastes might contain abrasive agents like ground seashells or salt to polish the teeth, combined with aromatic herbs like ginseng or mint to freshen the breath. The creation of a dedicated tool specifically for oral care represented a significant shift in thinking, moving dental hygiene from a haptic, almost accidental activity to a deliberate daily ritual. This remarkable invention did not stay confined to China for long. As with so many technologies, it began to travel along the sprawling networks of trade and exploration. European merchants and travelers returning from the East in the 16th and 17th centuries brought back these curious cleaning implements among their treasures. At first, they were exotic novelties, but their utility was immediately apparent. However, European artisans made a key adaptation. They found the hog bristles too harsh for their preferences and replaced them with softer horsehair or even feathers, while the handles were often crafted from more expensive materials like silver or tortoiseshell for the wealthy. It was in England in the late 18th century that the mass production of toothbrushes began, with William Addis often credited with popularizing the design after he allegedly created one while in prison using a bone and bristles procured by a guard. His company would go on to manufacture them on an industrial scale, but the core design principle, a handle with a row of bristles, remained entirely Chinese. The global journey of the toothbrush fundamentally transformed human health and social customs. Its widespread adoption led to a new cultural emphasis on oral hygiene that spread across the world. It democratized dental care, moving it from something only the elite could afford with precious metal picks and powders to an accessible practice for a much broader segment of the population. While modern toothbrushes now use nylon bristles and plastic handles, the fundamental design and purpose have remained unchanged for nearly 600 years. It stands as a powerful testament to how a simple, brilliant idea born from everyday necessity can transcend its origins to become a universal object, a quiet miracle of hygiene that improves billions of lives every single day. While military commanders were using kites to see over enemy walls, another ancient technology was taking to the skies not for observation, but for illumination and communication, harnessing a force even more fundamental than the wind, hot air. Centuries before the Montgolfier brothers became famous in Europe for their balloon flights, Chinese inventors and artists had already mastered the core principles of aerostatics, creating mesmerizing sky lanterns that transformed paper, bamboo, and a small flame into one of history's most enchanting and functional flying machines. The basic science behind these lanterns is a beautiful demonstration of physics in action. The design was always one of elegant simplicity, a lightweight bamboo frame crafted into a circular or cylindrical open base, over which a delicate shell of oiled paper or very thin silk was carefully stretched. At the center of the open base, a small platform held a fuel source, typically a wax-soaked cloth or a block of slow-burning animal fat. When the fuel was lit, the flame would heat the air trapped inside the enclosed paper shell. As we all know, hot air expands and becomes less dense than the cooler air surrounding it. This creates buoyancy. Once the difference in density between the internal heated air and the external cooler air became great enough, the upward force, the lift would overcome the lantern's minimal weight. The delicate craft would then tug gently against its tether or, if released, float silently and majestically into the night sky, becoming a solitary, flickering star. The most famous and enduring application of this technology was, and still is, ceremonial. Known as Kongming lanterns, named after the legendary strategist Zhu Liang of the Three Kingdoms period, they became powerful symbols of hope, good fortune, and the release of worries. During festivals, particularly the Chinese New Year and the Mid-Autumn Festival, thousands of these lanterns would be launched simultaneously, creating a breathtaking spectacle of drifting light that mirrored the heavens above. Each lantern carried with it the wishes and prayers of the person who released it, a tangible expression of hope ascending to the gods. This use transformed a simple physical phenomenon into a deeply cultural and spiritual act, a shared experience of awe that connected entire communities under a canopy of gentle, man-made stars. However, to view these lanterns solely as festive decorations is to overlook their serious strategic value. The Chinese military quickly recognized the potential of a lightweight, self-propelled signal that could be seen for miles in every direction. In an era before radio flares or signal guns, a Kongming lantern offered a brilliantly simple solution for long-distance communication between army units separated by difficult terrain. A single lantern rising into the sky could convey a prearranged message to advance, to halt, or to signal that a position was held. Their use was particularly effective for coordinating movements at night or across the vast, mountainous borders of the empire where other methods were impractical. The altitude these paper balloons could achieve was remarkable, allowing their light to be visible from incredible distances, cutting through the darkness and fog of war with a silent, unwavering flame. The ingenuity didn't stop at simple signals. Some historical accounts suggest more sophisticated military applications where the lanterns were adapted for psychological operations. There are tales of specially constructed giant lanterns capable of carrying small noisemakers or even limited incendiary materials. The goal wasn't necessarily to cause significant damage, but to create confusion and fear within enemy camps. Imagine being a soldier on watch in the dead of night, seeing an inexplicable, silent fire slowly drifting over your position from an unseen enemy. The psychological impact of such an unknown, seemingly magical object could be profound, sowing panic and undermining morale far more effectively than a conventional attack. This dual use of the technology for both beautiful ritual and calculated warfare perfectly encapsulates the ancient Chinese genius for taking a simple natural principle and refining it into a tool that served both the human spirit and the pragmatic needs of an empire. While ancient Chinese engineers were mastering the principles of flight with kites and lanterns, other brilliant minds were grappling with an equally monumental challenge: how to accurately represent the vast, sprawling empire they inhabited on a single sheet of paper or silk. This was not merely an artistic pursuit. It was a fundamental exercise of state power, a way to impose order, facilitate administration, and project control over a landscape of immense diversity and scale. The cartographers of ancient China didn't just draw maps. They developed a sophisticated science of representation, creating works of such stunning accuracy and mathematical rigor that they rival the precision of maps produced centuries later. The foundational breakthrough that elevated Chinese cartography from qualitative sketch to quantitative science was the invention and systematic application of the grid system. As early as the 3rd century, the brilliant inventor Pei Zhu, often called the father of Chinese cartography, formalized 6 essential principles for mapmaking. The most crucial of these was the use of a uniform grid of squares, a concept he called division by squares. Here's how this revolutionary technique worked. a cartographer would first establish a consistent scale for their map, perhaps defining one square on the grid as equivalent to 100 lie about 33 miles on the ground. Every feature, a mountain range, a river bend, a city wall, would then be meticulously plotted within this matrix of coordinates. This method eliminated the distortion and guesswork that plagued maps from other cultures, where the size and position of landmarks were often exaggerated based on their perceived importance rather than their true geographic location. A city wasn't just drawn bigger because it was the capital. Its size on the map was a direct mathematical function of its actual dimensions and its distance from other points. This grid transformed the map from a subjective illustration into an objective, measurable database. This mathematical precision was powerfully demonstrated in the work of the Song dynasty cartographers. They produced immense, detailed maps of the entire empire, such as the famous Yujai II, the map of the tracks of Yu, carved into stone in 1136. This stunning map, which still survives today, uses a grid system of over 5,000 squares to represent the coastlines, river systems, and administrative districts of China with a level of accuracy that would be impressive even with modern satellite imagery. The true testament to its scientific value lies in its ability to be used for practical calculation. A government official could use a pair of dividers to measure the grid squares between two distant cities and reliably calculate the actual distance between them for planning a journey, deploying troops, or coordinating tax collection. This wasn't just a picture, it was a functional tool for governance, but a flat grid alone couldn't capture the full reality of a kingdom defined by dramatic mountain ranges, deep river valleys, and sweeping plains. Chinese cartographers pioneered ingenious methods for representing this third dimension, developing a sophisticated visual language for relief. Unlike the European tradition that would later use hachuring drawing lines to show slope, Chinese mapmakers employed a more intuitive and visually striking technique. They would use textured, brushstroke-like patterns to give a sense of the form and mass of a mountain range. A series of delicate, wispy strokes might indicate rolling foothills, while bold, rugged, tooth-like shapes would represent the jagged peaks of a major chain like the Himalayas. These weren't just decorative elements, they were carefully calibrated symbols that conveyed the character of the terrain. Sometimes they would use a method of fish-scale patterns to depict elevation, where concentric, scaled patterns implied a rising peak. This allowed a user to instantly understand not just where a mountain was, but what kind of mountain it was, providing crucial information for travelers, military logicians, and hydraulic engineers who needed to understand watersheds and water flow. The creation of these masterpieces required another technological marvel: incredibly accurate land surveys conducted on a staggering scale. Teams of surveyors working under the direction of the imperial court would traverse the length and breadth of the empire. Their primary tool for measuring distance was the odometer cart, a clever vehicle equipped with a series of gears that would drop a ball or strike a drum after every specific distance traveled, often one lie. This provided a mechanical and reliable way to log long journeys. For measuring direction, they relied on the magnetic compass, which by the Song dynasty had been refined into a reliable navigational instrument. But their true skill lay in their application of trigonometry and triangulation. By taking bearings on prominent landmarks from multiple known positions, they could calculate distances across impassable terrain like wide rivers or deep gorges without ever setting foot there. The culmination of this centuries-long project of measurement and compilation was a cartographic tradition that provided the Chinese state with an unparalleled understanding of its own domain. These maps enabled everything from the planning of the Grand Canal, one of the largest pre-modern engineering projects in history, to the precise deployment of armies and the efficient administration of a vast, complex bureaucracy. They stand as a quiet testament to a different kind of power, Not the power of force, but the power of knowledge, the profound ability to see a kingdom in its entirety and to hold it, perfectly measured and precisely rendered, in the palm of your hand. After the meticulous work of planting and harvesting came one of agriculture's most tedious, yet absolutely vital, chores: the separation of the precious edible grain from the inedible husks and straw, a process known as winnowing. For millennia, this was a task entirely at the mercy of the wind. Farmers would take a basket full of threshed grain and toss it into the air on a breezy day. The lighter chaff and husks would be carried away by the wind, while the heavier, dense grains would fall back down to be collected. It was a method that was slow, inefficient, and utterly dependent on the whims of the weather. A still day could bring the entire post-harvest process to a grinding halt, leaving valuable food stores vulnerable to rot and pests. The ancient Chinese solution to this age-old problem was a stroke of mechanical genius, the winnowing machine, a device that brought the power of the wind indoors and put it on a crank. The design was a masterpiece of focused airflow. Imagine a sturdy wooden cabinet about the size of a large chest of drawers mounted on 4 legs. At the front was a large hopper into which the farmer would pour the mixture of grain and chaff. The real magic happened inside. Turning a hand crank on the side of the machine rotated a set of wooden fan blades housed within an enclosed chamber, not unlike the blower in a modern furnace. This action forced a steady, controllable stream of air through a duct that directed it across the path of the falling grain. As the mixture was fed from the hopper through a narrow slit, it fell in a continuous curtain right into this manufactured gust. The lighter chaff and dust were instantly blown away into a separate collection area, while the cleaned grain, unaffected by the artificial breeze, dropped straight down into a waiting basket or bag positioned below. This was a system of perfect mechanical segregation, replacing unpredictable natural wind with a reliable, on-demand gale that could operate in any weather at any time of day or night. The impact on processing efficiency was nothing short of revolutionary. What once required a full day of backbreaking labor for an entire family, waiting for wind, repeatedly tossing baskets, and painstakingly sweeping up the grain, could now be accomplished by a single person in a fraction of the time. The winnowing machine didn't just save time, it dramatically reduced waste. The controlled environment meant nearly 100% of the edible grain was recovered, as there was no risk of a sudden strong gust blowing the good kernels away with the chaff. This reliability was a game changer for food security. It allowed communities to process their harvests much faster, getting staple foods like rice, wheat, and millet into storage granaries quickly, safe from moisture, mildew, and insects. This mechanical assurance directly translated into more stable food, supplies for growing populations, and larger, more resilient surpluses that could see an empire through a lean year or a drought. Beyond the farmyard, the winnowing machine played a subtle but profound role in the development of industry itself. Its core mechanism, a crank driving a rotary fan, was a fundamental application of principles that would become essential to later engineering. The precise gearing required to translate the slow, forceful turn of a human-powered crank into the high-speed rotation needed for an effective fan blade was an exercise in mechanical ratio calculation. The design of the fan housing to maximize airflow efficiency showed an advanced understanding of aerodynamics long before the term was coined. This humble agricultural tool stands as a critical link in the chain of invention, a practical application of rotary force and air movement that would eventually inform the design of everything from ventilation systems in deep mines to the cooling fans of the modern computer age. It was a machine that did one simple job perfectly, but in doing so, it embodied a principle of powered, automated separation that would echo through centuries of technological progress, all beginning with the simple turn of a crank to put the wind to work. But for all the high-flying ingenuity of kites and the detailed precision of maps, perhaps the most globally transformative technology to emerge from ancient China was one born from earth and fire, a material so exquisite that it became synonymous with the empire itself and sparked a centuries-long obsession across the entire world. We're talking, of course, about porcelain, a substance so mystifying to Europeans when they first encountered it that they called it white gold and believed it possessed magical properties capable of detecting poison or shattering if touched by a poisoned lip. Yet there was no magic involved, only a level of chemical and thermal engineering so advanced it would remain an impenetrable secret for over 1,000 years. The journey to creating true porcelain began not in the kiln, but deep underground with the discovery of a very special type of clay. While much of the world made pottery from common red earthenware, Chinese artisans identified and prized two unique ingredients. The first was kaolin, a pure white clay named after the Jialing mountain where it was first quarried. Kaolin is refractory, meaning it can withstand extremely high temperatures without deforming. The second key ingredient was petunci, a type of feldspathic rock also known as China stone. When ground into a fine powder and mixed with the kaolin, the petunci acted as a flux. During the intense heat of the kiln, it would vitrify, melting into a glassy matrix that fused with the stubborn kaolin particles. This marriage of materials was the absolute heart of the secret. The kaolin provided the structural skeleton, while the petunci melted and filled all the microscopic pores, creating a body that was non-porous, translucent, incredibly strong, and capable of producing that iconic, pure ringing tone when tapped. Getting this mixture exactly right and processing it to remove every last speck of impurity was a meticulous, guarded process passed down through generations of potter families. But the perfect clay mixture was useless without the means to tame the dragon, the incredible, roaring fire required to transform it. This is where Chinese kiln technology achieved its true masterpiece. While European kilns of the era were simple, inefficient updraft designs that struggled to reach temperatures sufficient for stoneware, Chinese potters developed the dragon kiln. This was a stroke of architectural genius. Built directly into the side of a steep hill, the kiln was a long, tunnel-like chamber, sometimes stretching over 150 feet. The slope was the key to its power. The firebox was at the lowest point, and the heat and flames would race uphill through the entire length of the chamber, creating a powerful natural draft that sucked oxygen in and superheated the interior. Dozens of small stoking holes were built into the side of the kiln at regular intervals, allowing workers to continuously feed wood into the fire at different stages, creating an even temperature throughout its vast length. This design could achieve and sustain temperatures in excess of 1,300 degrees Celsius, a blistering heat necessary to trigger the vitrification of the petunci and create true, impervious porcelain. Controlling this beast was an art form in itself. Masters known as fire diviners would judge the temperature by staring through a small spy hole into the inferno, reading the color of the flames and the glow of the ceramics inside with an almost supernatural accuracy gained from a lifetime of experience. This mastery over the fiery environment allowed for the development of China's most iconic and coveted ceramic styles, each with its own guarded formula. The first was celadon, a ware that seems to capture the very essence of serenity. The elusive jade green glaze wasn't painted on, it was a chemical reaction of breathtaking subtlety. The glaze itself contained a small amount of iron oxide. During the firing process, the kiln atmosphere had to be carefully manipulated to become reducing, meaning the fire was starved of oxygen. In this smoky environment, the iron oxide underwent a chemical transformation, and when the finished piece cooled, it revealed not a rusty brown, but those soft, mysterious shades of gray-green that resembled precious jade. Achieving the exact hue, from a pale seafoam to a deep olive required absolute control over the kiln's atmosphere and the precise chemistry of the glaze, a secret closely held by kilns like those at Longquan. Then there is the style that became the ultimate global status symbol, blue and white porcelain. Its creation was a story of international trade and chemical ingenuity. The brilliant cobalt blue used to paint the intricate designs under the glaze was not originally from China. It was imported from Persia, where potters had been using it for centuries. Chinese merchants brought this precious mineral, known as Muslim blue, back along the Silk Road, where it was vastly more expensive than gold. Artists would paint their elaborate scenes of dragons, flowers, and landscapes onto the unfired, bone-dry porcelain body. Then the piece was dipped in a clear glaze and fired. The secret to the timeless brilliance of the blue was the firing process. The clear glaze, when melted, sealed the cobalt painting beneath a hard, glassy, and perfectly transparent layer, protecting it from fading or wear forever. The contrast between the stark white porcelain body and the vibrant blue created an aesthetic so powerful that it sparked a mania in Europe. For centuries, alchemists and potters from Venice to Delft tried and failed to reverse engineer the recipe, their attempts resulting in softer, opaque earthenware like tin-glazed faience. The secret of true porcelain, born from the unique combination of Chinese kaolin, petunci, and dragon kilns, remained safely within the empire, a technological and artistic monopoly that fueled a global craze and defined Chinese luxury for the world. Yet for all the technological might displayed on land, the true ambition of ancient China stretched far beyond its borders, across the trackless expanse of the ocean. To command the seas required vessels of immense size and strength, but a large ship is useless without the means to control it. For centuries, sailors around the world relied on a simple steering oar or a quarter rudder, a large paddle mounted on the side of the ship's hull. While functional, it was a system with profound limitations. It was brutally difficult to maneuver in strong winds or heavy seas, required immense physical strength from the helmsman, and could be easily damaged. The Chinese solution to this ancient maritime problem was a breakthrough so fundamental that it forever changed the course of naval architecture: the stern-mounted axial rudder. The genius of this invention lies in its elegant application of hydrodynamics. Unlike a steering oar which is dragged through the water, a true rudder is a flat or slightly curved plate of wood mounted vertically on hinges attached to the ship's stern post, the central timber at the very back of the hull. This pivotal placement is everything. When the helmsman turns the tiller, the entire rudder blade rotates on its axis, biting into the water flowing past the hull. This action creates a pressure differential, higher pressure on one side of the blade and lower pressure on the other. It is this difference in pressure that pushes the stern of the ship in the opposite direction, causing the entire vessel to pivot smoothly and predictably around a central point. The effect is one of incredible leverage. A single sailor could now direct the course of a massive ship with a gentle pressure on the tiller, a task that would have required a team of men straining against a heavy steering oar. This technological leap did not happen overnight. Archaeological evidence, including pottery models from the 1st century Han Dynasty tombs, shows ships with rudders that were lowered through a well in the stern, allowing them to be raised in shallow water, a clear precursor to the fully integrated design. But it was during the Song Dynasty that the technology matured into the form we would recognize today. The real test and ultimate triumph of the stern rudder came with the legendary treasure voyages of the Ming Dynasty Admiral Zhang He in the early 15th century. His fleet, the largest the world had ever seen, included colossal treasure ships reported to be over 400 feet long. Commanding such a leviathan with a side-mounted steering oar would have been nearly impossible. The stern-mounted rudder was the essential enabling technology that gave these giants their grace. It allowed Zheng He's navigators to sail confidently across the Indian Ocean, through narrow straits and into unfamiliar harbors, knowing they had the precise control needed to handle any situation. The rudder gave them the confidence to undertake these epic voyages of diplomacy and exploration, knowing they could always steer their priceless cargo home. The advantages over the old steering oar system were numerous and decisive. Being mounted centrally on the strongest part of the hull, the stern post, the rudder was far more robust and less likely to be sheared off in a collision or a storm. Its position in the smooth water flowed directly behind the propeller, or in the case of Chinese ships, the stern, made it vastly more efficient, reacting instantly to the helmsman's input. This efficiency also reduced drag when sailing a straight course, as the rudder could be centered perfectly aligned with the hull. Perhaps most importantly, it freed up space on the sides of the ship that would have been occupied by steering or crews, allowing for more efficient deck layouts and broader, more stable hull designs. This single innovation, born in Chinese shipyards, would eventually diffuse across the globe through trade and contact, becoming the universal standard for steering every ship from a tiny fishing skiff to a massive aircraft carrier. It was a quiet revolution in control that truly allowed humanity to master the sea. But mastering the waves with a revolutionary rudder was only one part of the equation. To truly unite their vast empire, ancient Chinese engineers also had to conquer the formidable natural barriers that divided the land itself. Imagine the challenge of governing a continent-spanning realm where trade routes, tax collectors, and imperial armies could be halted for weeks or months by a single, raging river in flood or an impassable mountain gorge. The solution was not to go around these obstacles, but to build over them with a breathtaking array of bridges that pushed the very limits of materials and imagination. Far from simple stone crossings, these were engineered masterpieces of physics and geometry, designed to withstand earthquakes, flash floods, and the relentless march of time. Among the most enduring and ingenious of these designs was the segmental arch bridge, a concept that seems to defy logic. While the Romans perfected the semicircular arch, which requires massive, heavy abutments on either side to contain the tremendous outward thrust, Chinese engineers asked a brilliant question: what if we flattened the curve? The result was an arch that formed just a segment of a circle, rising only slightly from its supports. This seemingly minor geometrical tweak had revolutionary consequences. A flatter arch generated significantly less outward thrust, which meant the supporting piers and riverbanks didn't need to be nearly as heavy or fortified. This saved an immense amount of labor and material, but the real magic was in what it did for the people below. A semicircular arch, while strong, is like a great humpbacked whale. It rises high above the water, creating a steep, difficult climb for carts and animals. The low, gentle slope of a segmental arch allowed for a nearly level roadway, making passage easier and faster. It also created a much wider opening beneath the bridge, allowing floodwaters and high-masted boats to pass through with ease, drastically reducing the risk of the structure being smashed by debris or the pressure of pent-up water. The most famous example of this genius is the astonishing Anji Bridge, also known as the Zhejiu Bridge, built in the early 7th century by the master craftsman Lai Chun. Stretching over 123 feet across the Zhao River, its main arch is a beautifully shallow segment, but its true innovation lies in the 4 smaller, auxiliary arches carved into the body of the bridge on either side of the main span. These weren't decorative, they were a stroke of structural brilliance. These open spandrels served multiple critical functions. They drastically reduced the bridge's overall weight and the amount of stone required. They allowed floodwaters to pass through during a surge instead of slamming against the solid structure, and they made the entire bridge more resilient to seismic shocks by adding flexibility. That this elegant structure has stood for over 1,400 years, surviving innumerable floods and earthquakes, is a powerful testament to the sophistication of its design. A silent monument to an engineer who understood the forces of nature better than anyone in his time. For spanning even wider or more turbulent waterways, Chinese engineers developed another revolutionary technology, the iron chain suspension bridge. While simple rope bridges made of bamboo or vines had been used in mountainous regions for centuries, the substitution of wrought iron chains represented a monumental leap in strength, durability, and span length. The process began at the forge, where blacksmiths would painstakingly hand-forge individual iron links, each one carefully interlocked with the next to form a massive chain of incredible tensile strength. The installation was a breathtaking feat of courage and coordination. One end of a light pilot rope would be attached to an arrow and shot across the chasm, or sometimes even carried across by a kite. This rope would then be used to pull a stronger cord, which in turn would pull a heavier rope in a progressively stronger series until the massive, incredibly heavy iron chain could be dragged across and secured to enormous stone anchorages carved directly into the living rock on either side of the gorge. Multiple chains would be positioned side by side, with thinner chains or planks suspended between them to form the deck, and additional chains serving as handrails. These bridges transformed travel and trade in the rugged western provinces of Sichuan and Yunnan, where deep river gorges had once formed impassable barriers. The most famous of these, the Luding Bridge over the treacherous Dodu River, became a legendary strategic crossing. Its deck, made of wooden planks laid across 9 vast iron chains, swayed precariously over the roaring rapids below, but it held firm, allowing armies and merchants to cross where no boat could survive. The flexibility of the suspension design was its greatest asset. Rather than fighting against the wind and the natural movement of the earth, it was designed to absorb and dissipate that energy, swaying and vibrating without collapsing. This same principle of using iron's tensile strength was also applied to create cantilevered bridges, where horizontal beams were anchored at one end and projected out over space, often supported by diagonal braces to form a rigid triangular structure. In complex multi-span cantilever bridges, these beams would project from opposite piers until they met in the middle, where a final, closing segment would be dropped into place to complete the span. This method allowed for construction over deep water without the need for complex cofferdams or temporary supports, demonstrating a profound understanding of static balance and leverage. Together, these advanced bridge-building techniques, the compressive elegance of the segmental arch, the tensile strength of iron chains, and the balanced leverage of the cantilever, wove the disparate regions of ancient China into a single, interconnected whole, proving that true innovation often lies in building connections, not walls. But while the rudder gave sailors command of the seas and mighty bridges spanned its rivers, one of China's most whimsical yet utterly practical inventions was designed for the vast, windswept plains of the northern provinces. Picture the landscape, immense, flat expanses of land, perfect for agriculture and transport, but where a single farmer or laborer might need to move a staggering amount of goods, harvested grain, blocks of salt, construction materials across great distances. The standard wheelbarrow was a fantastic tool, a classic one-man wagon that leveraged a single wheel to bear a heavy load. But on these open plains, Chinese engineers saw an opportunity to tap into another ubiquitous and powerful force, the wind itself. Their solution was to marry the two, creating a machine that must have looked like a land-bound junk ship, the sailing wheelbarrow. The design of these vehicles was a masterclass in adaptive engineering. These were not the small, garden-variety wheelbarrows we know today. They were substantial cargo platforms, often several feet long, centered over a single, large wooden wheel that could be as tall as a man. The wheel itself was frequently solid, sometimes spoked, and designed to handle significant weight and rough terrain. The key innovation was the mast and sail, which was mounted directly onto the wheelbarrow's frame. The sail wasn't merely a decorative addition. It was a fully functional square rigged or lug sail, complete with sheets and lines that ran back to the operator. The operator themselves would stand between 2 long handles at the rear, acting not just as a pusher, but as a helmsman and sailor on dry land. They would grip the handles to steer the front wheel while simultaneously managing the sail lines to catch the wind at the most efficient angle. On a good day with a steady breeze, the sail could provide the majority of the propulsion, allowing the operator to simply guide the vehicle with minimal effort, their hands managing the lines rather than straining to push the load. The efficiency gains were nothing short of phenomenal. European travelers in the 17th and 18th centuries, upon encountering these remarkable devices, wrote home with astonished descriptions. One Dutch observer noted that a single person with a sailing wheelbarrow could transport well over 600 pounds of goods as easily as if it were nothing, gliding across the plains at a speed that would have required a team of multiple men or draft animals using a conventional cart. This was a transformative advantage in a pre-industrial economy where human and animal labor were the primary limits on productivity. The sailing wheelbarrow effectively multiplied the strength of a single worker, allowing one person to do the work of 3 or 4. This had profound implications for trade and logistics, making it vastly cheaper and faster to move bulk goods like grain, cotton, or salt from rural production areas to market towns, canals, or storage facilities. It was a democratization of hauling power, putting the force of the wind at the disposal of the individual farmer or merchant. What truly amazed European observers beyond the sheer practicality was the intuitive skill of the operators. These men were masters of reading the landscape and the weather. They understood how to trim the sail for different wind conditions, how to steer to maintain the best course, and how to balance the load for optimal stability. They were, in essence, pilots. The sight of a fleet of these sailing wheelbarrows moving in convoy across a plain must have been a surreal and magnificent spectacle, a silent armada traversing a sea of grass and earth. For the Chinese operators, it was simply the most logical application of available resources. They lived in a land with vast flat terrain and consistent seasonal winds. It was only natural to use that free, abundant energy to alleviate human toil. The sailing wheelbarrow stands as a brilliant, almost poetic example of a technology perfectly adapted to its environment. It required no complex mechanics or rare materials, just a clever recombination of existing ideas. The wheel, the sail, the lever, into something entirely new and extraordinarily effective. It was a simple machine that turned a solitary worker into a force of nature. While the sailing wheelbarrow harnessed the wind to move goods across the surface, the most critical journey was happening invisibly below, in the very soil that sustained the empire. For a civilization that fed one of the largest populations on Earth for thousands of years, the greatest technological challenge wasn't just growing food. It was doing so continuously on the same land, season after season, century after century, without depleting the ground that gave life. Ancient Chinese farmers developed a sophisticated science of the earth itself, a deep, empirical understanding of soil management and fertilization that allowed them to practice what might be history's most successful and enduring form of sustainable agriculture. This began with a meticulous classification of soil types that went far beyond simple dirt. Early agricultural treatises, like the Essential Classic of Agriculture from the Yuan dynasty, detailed a complex taxonomy of earth. Farmers learned to identify soils not just by color, but by texture, moisture retention, drainage, and crucially, by what would grow best in them. They knew that a rich, dark loam was ideal for millet, while a well-drained, sandy soil was perfect for certain legumes. This wasn't guesswork, it was a passed-down science of feel and observation. A farmer would take a handful of earth, squeeze it, observe how it held together, and even taste it to gauge its salt content. This profound intimacy with the land allowed for incredible efficiency. Instead of fighting against their environment, they learned to work with it, matching specific crops to the soils where they would naturally thrive, maximizing yields with a precision that seems almost modern. But even the richest soil will eventually wear out if the same crop is planted year after year, a process we now understand as nutrient depletion. Chinese agrarians observed this exhaustion and devised a brilliant countermeasure: complex crop rotation systems. This was far more advanced than simply switching between two plants. They developed intricate multi-year cycles that were like a perfectly choreographed dance for the soil. A common system in the north might involve planting wheat one year, which heavily consumes nitrogen from the earth. The following year, instead of leaving the field fallow to recover, they would plant soybeans. Through a symbiotic relationship with bacteria on their roots, legumes like soybeans have the miraculous ability to pull nitrogen from the air and fix it into the soil, effectively creating their own fertilizer and replenishing what the wheat had taken. The third year, a different, less nutrient-hungry crop like millet might be planted. This cyclical understanding of give and take transformed farming from a practice of extraction to one of renewal, creating a closed-loop system that kept the land perpetually productive and healthy. The true masterstroke, however, was their revolutionary approach to waste. In a stunningly prescient example of circular economy thinking, they viewed nothing as refuse and everything as potential resource. Every scrap of organic matter was collected and composted with deliberate care. Kitchen scraps, leftover straw from threshing, pond silt rich in decomposed aquatic life, and even mud from dredged canals were all meticulously piled and composted to create a rich, life-giving humus. But their most famous, and to outsiders, most shocking fertilization technique was the systematic and organized collection of human waste. In both bustling cities and rural villages, night soil was not waste to be disposed of, but a valuable commodity to be collected, treated, and traded. Specialized collectors would make regular rounds, purchasing this material from households and transporting it to the countryside. There, it was never applied raw, which could burn plants and spread disease. Instead, it was composted in large sealed pits for months, often mixed with straw and earth, where fermentation would break down pathogens and transform it into a safe, stable, and incredibly potent organic fertilizer. This practice achieved something remarkable. It closed the nutrient loop between urban and rural environments. The nutrients that city dwellers consumed as food, which would have otherwise been lost down a river or in a landfill, were captured and returned to the fields to grow more food. It was a sustainable cycle that prevented the pollution of waterways and enriched the soil with a perfect balance of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The effectiveness of this system was so profound that it caught the attention of European travelers in the 18th and 19th centuries, who marveled at the agricultural productivity they witnessed and noted with astonishment the meticulous recycling of what they considered mere waste. This ancient Chinese understanding that the health of the soil is directly linked to the health of the people, and that nothing in nature is truly wasted, stands as one of the most enduring and environmentally intelligent technologies ever developed, a testament to a culture that learned to work within the natural world's cycles rather than against them. Now consider the very instrument that put that power into the hands of a single soldier, a weapon so technologically advanced it functioned like a modern firearm centuries before its time. This was the Chinese crossbow, and its true genius lay not in the bow itself, but in the breathtakingly complex machine housed within its stock, the bronze trigger mechanism. While many cultures developed basic crossbows, the Chinese version was a masterpiece of precision engineering, a mass-produced mechanical marvel that could be aimed, held ready indefinitely, and released with a gentle, consistent pressure, granting its user a decisive advantage over any other projectile weapon on the ancient battlefield. The heart of this system was a cast bronze box, often referred to as the lock or the action, which contained a series of 3 intricately interlocking pieces: the sear, the nut, and the trigger lever. The process of operation was a study in mechanical perfection. To load, the archer would place a bolt in the groove and draw the string back with all their strength, often bracing the bow with their feet and using both arms. As the string reached its full draw, it would be caught and securely held by a notch in the rotating bronze nut. This nut was itself held in place by a precisely angled arm called the sear. This entire assembly was under immense tensile strain, with the full power of the bow trying to force the nut to rotate and release the string. The sear, locked against the nut by a spring, was the only thing preventing a catastrophic and immediate discharge. To fire, the archer simply placed their finger into a guard, one of history's first safety features, and pressed a small, curved lever. This lever didn't just pull the sear down, it pushed it out of the way with a cam-like action, withdrawing its restraining edge from the nut. Instantly freed, the nut would spin on its axis, releasing the bowstring to launch the bolt with devastating force. The beauty of this mechanism was its crisp, clean release. Unlike a traditional bow where the archer's finger release could introduce wobble and inaccuracy, the crossbow's mechanical trigger provided a perfectly consistent and instantaneous release every single time, making it far more accurate, especially in the hands of a trained but not elite soldier. This sophisticated trigger system enabled the creation of one of the most fearsome and unique weapons in history, the repeating crossbow or zhuge nu. Believed to be invented by the legendary strategist Zhu Liang, this weapon was the assault rifle of its era. It featured an overhead magazine, a box mounted on the stock that could hold up to 10 quarrels. A simple forward and back motion of a lever on the underside of the stock performed a continuous cycle of actions. It drew the string, dropped a bolt from the magazine into the firing groove, and released the trigger, all in one fluid motion. A skilled operator could unleash a volley of bolts in seconds, creating a terrifying hail of projectiles ideal for defending walls against massed infantry or repelling boarding actions on ships. While it sacrificed some range and raw power for this incredible rate of fire, its psychological impact and ability to saturate an area were unmatched. This weapon's existence was entirely dependent on the reliability of its trigger mechanism, which had to cycle flawlessly, shot after shot, under the stress of combat. It represented a philosophy of volume fire and rapid deployment that wouldn't be seen again until the invention of repeating firearms. The mass production of these intricate bronze mechanisms is a story of industrial organization that rivals any modern assembly line. To equip vast imperial armies with thousands of identical, interchangeable crossbows, Qin and Han dynasty arsenals perfected a process of modular casting. Artisans would create master patterns for each component, the sear, the nut, the lever, and the housing itself out of a durable material like clay or bronze. These master patterns were then used to press impression after impression into fine sand, creating disposable molds. Molten bronze would be poured into these molds, and once cooled, the rough casting would be removed. The final and most critical step was hand finishing. Highly skilled filers would take each component and painstakingly work it with abrasives and tools until it fit perfectly with its counterparts. This ensured that any nut from any workshop could fit into any housing and be held by any sear. The concept of interchangeable parts, often credited to 19th century American gunsmiths, was alive and well in ancient China. This logistical miracle meant a commander could have a ready supply of replacement parts in the field, and a crossbow salvaged from a fallen comrade could be easily repaired and returned to action. This marriage of precision engineering and systematic mass production created a military advantage that helped forge and defend an empire, proving that the smallest piece of carefully crafted metal could alter the balance of power on a continental scale. Beneath the clang of bronze triggers and the rumble of siege engines, another revolution was unfolding with a far softer touch, one that would weave its way into the very fabric of global desire. While empires were won with steel, they were often financed and their elites adorned by an even more precious commodity, silk. The cultivation of silkworms and the unwinding of their delicate cocoons was a Chinese monopoly guarded as a state secret for centuries. But the true technological marvel wasn't just the raw thread. It was the breathtaking machinery developed to transform it into textiles of mind-boggling complexity, fabrics so intricate they were considered fit for gods and emperors. The journey from cocoon to cloth began with a deceptively simple yet brilliantly efficient device, the silk reeling machine. This apparatus solved the fundamental problem of handling a filament that could be over 3,000 feet long but was finer than a human hair. The process started by gently heating cocoons in hot water to soften the sericin, the natural gum that held the silk filament together. A reeling machine consisted of a large basin for the hot water, above which was a series of eyelets and a central winding reel. The operator, almost always a woman with nimble fingers and immense patience, would gather the loose ends from several cocoons floating in the water and draw them up through the guide eyelets, twisting them together to form a single, stronger thread. The true innovation was in the mechanism that turned the reel. Early versions were hand-cranked, but by the Song dynasty, they were expertly adapted to be driven by a foot treadle. This freed the operator's hands entirely for the delicate work of feeling the thread and adding new cocoons to maintain a consistent thickness, a process known as silk feeling. This foot-powered operation allowed for a continuous, uninterrupted reeling process, dramatically increasing both the quality and the quantity of raw silk that could be produced. The resulting thread was so uniform and strong it became the gold standard for weavers across Eurasia, the indispensable raw material that would fuel the legendary Silk Road. But creating the thread was only half the battle. Weaving it into patterns more complex than simple stripes required a technological leap in loom design that was nothing short of a precursor to the computer. The standard loom of the era could only lift all the warp threads, the vertical ones at once, limiting patterns to basic checks. To create the elaborate draconic and floral motifs that defined imperial Chinese silk, weavers needed to individually control hundreds, even thousands of warp threads. The solution was the drawloom, a towering masterpiece of mechanical engineering that could fill an entire room. Its operation required a team of 2 highly skilled weavers. The senior weaver, the master, sat at the front, passing the shuttle carrying the weft thread back and forth. Their apprentice, often a young boy, would perch high atop the massive frame of the loom in a space called the drawing tower. The entire pattern was encoded into a complex web of cords hanging from the loom's frame. Each cord was attached to a specific set of warp threads. Following the master's calls or a pre-arranged pattern, the drawboy would pull on specific sequences of these cords, lifting precise groupings of warps to create a shed, a temporary opening, through which the master could pass the shuttle with a specific colored thread. For a single row of a complex pattern, the drawboy might have to execute a dozen different pulls. A single robe could contain tens of thousands of weft threads, meaning this incredibly tedious and physically demanding dance between master and assistant had to be repeated flawlessly thousands of times. The resulting fabrics, known as kesi or cut silk, were so detailed they resembled paintings with sharp outlines and subtle color gradations that were the envy of the world. The sheer mental burden of memorizing and executing these complex cord-pulling sequences for every single pass of the shuttle was immense and prone to error. This challenge led to one of the most extraordinary innovations in the history of technology, the invention of a programmable pattern memory system. Sometime between the Han and Tang dynasties, Chinese weavers began to adapt a simple binary system used for tying knots into a revolutionary control mechanism for the drawloom. They created a set of pattern cards, flat strips of bamboo or wood with holes punched in them in a specific sequence. These cards were strung together in order onto a continuous loop. This loop was then mounted onto the loom and connected to the cords controlling the warp threads. As the master weaver worked, they would advance this chain of cards with each pass of the shuttle. For each row, the pattern card would determine which cords were active. Where a hole was punched, a needle would catch, allowing a leash to be pulled and lifting a specific warp thread. Where there was no hole, the needle would simply slide over the solid wood, and that thread would remain down. This was a form of read-only memory, a physical programming language made of wood and rope. A long, intricate pattern could be programmed once onto hundreds of these cards by a master designer, and then any skilled weaver could reproduce it perfectly, time and time again, simply by operating the loom and advancing the chain. This concept of using punched cards to store and automate complex instructions would not appear in the West until the 18th century, when it was adopted for jacquard looms, and it formed the foundational principle that the earliest computers would use for data processing. In the quiet hum of the Chinese silk workshop, the basic principle of the digital age was being born, not in silicon but in silk. But the ingenuity of harnessing the wind for land travel didn't stop with the practical sailing wheelbarrow. It was scaled up to create a vehicle of such spectacle and speed that it blurred the line between transportation and theater. Picture a lightweight, chariot-like carriage, but instead of being drawn by horses, it was propelled by a massive, brightly colored square sail mounted on a central mast. These were the legendary land sail carriages, vehicles that could glide across the hard, packed earth of the northern plains at speeds that reportedly left galloping horses in their dust, becoming a breathtaking fusion of maritime technology and terrestrial ambition. The construction of these remarkable machines was a masterclass in adapting nautical principles to a very different environment. The carriage itself was built for minimal weight and maximum stability, often utilizing a wide wheelbase to prevent tipping in strong crosswinds. The most critical component was the steering system, which had to solve the unique challenge of directing a wind-powered vehicle on solid ground. Unlike a boat's rudder, which works in water, a landcraft needed a different solution. Many designs employed an ingenious system where the entire front axle, complete with its pair of wheels, could be pivoted by the driver using a long tiller. This allowed for precise directional control, much like turning the front wheels of a car, enabling the driver to tack against the wind or make sharp maneuvers. The sail was fully rigged with sheets and lines, requiring the driver to possess the skills of a seasoned sailor, constantly adjusting the angle of the sail to capture the wind with maximum efficiency. The sight and sound of these carriages, the canvas snapping taut in the wind, the wheels rumbling across the dry earth, must have been an unforgettable spectacle of speed and silence. While the potential for practical use was certainly there, historical accounts suggest these carriages found their most celebrated role as imperial entertainment devices. Emperors and high officials were reportedly enthralled by their incredible velocity, using them for thrill rides, races, and dramatic displays of technological prowess during court festivals. The ability to travel at such speeds without animal power was a powerful symbol of the dynasty's command over the natural elements, a moving testament to its innovative spirit. Some sources even indicate they were used for rapid communication along certain flat, wind-swept routes, with messengers achieving journey times that were simply impossible with traditional horse relay systems. The land sail carriage stands as a brilliant, albeit niche, experiment, a testament to the ancient Chinese desire to push the boundaries of what was possible, to take a technology from one domain and fearlessly apply it to another, creating not just a tool, but an unforgettable experience of pure, wind-driven momentum. Yet for all the rhythmic cadence of the treadle pump and the percussive force of the deep drill, one of the most defining sounds of ancient Chinese industry was neither gentle nor quiet. It was the thunderous, repetitive crash of the water-powered trip hammer, a machine that turned the brute force of falling water into the relentless, automated muscle that powered entire sectors of the earth. Economy. Imagine the scene inside a sprawling imperial foundry or a mountainside ore-crushing mill. The air thick with dust and the smell of wet stone and hot metal, dominated by the deafening, rhythmic boom of massive wooden hammers, each one weighing hundreds of pounds, rising and falling with the tireless, mechanical precision of a giant's heartbeat. This wasn't just a tool, it was a system, a groundbreaking application of hydro-mechanical power that foreshadowed the entire concept of industrial automation 1,000 years before the factories of the Industrial Revolution. The core mechanism was a beautiful, brutal feat of leverage. At the heart of the system was a vertically mounted water wheel, its design often different from the ones used for irrigation. Instead of paddles, its rim was studded with a series of wooden pegs or cams. As the flowing water turned the wheel, these cams would sequentially lift the long, pivoting handles attached to a row of massive hammers. The genius was in the release. Once a cam had pushed the handle to its apex, it would suddenly slip past, allowing the far heavier hammer head on the opposite end of the lever to drop free onto the workpiece below with devastating force. The water wheel's continuous rotation would then bring the next cam into position to lift the next hammer, creating a cascading, overlapping rhythm of impacts that could operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without fatigue, without complaint, and without the need for rest. It was a perfect transfer of energy, the steady, linear flow of the river transformed into a controlled, percussive blast furnace of power. The applications for this automated hammering were vast and transformative. In agriculture, arrays of these hammers were set up in rice mills to hull grain. The pounding action was perfect for breaking the tough, inedible husks away from the precious rice kernels inside, a task that previously required endless hours of laborious hand pounding with mortars and pestles. With water-powered hammers, a single mill could process enough grain to feed a small city, drastically reducing the labor cost of food preparation and creating a surplus that fueled urban growth. But the true industrial might of the trip hammer was revealed in metallurgy and mining. For metal workers, these hammers were indispensable for forging. They could pre-shape red-hot iron blooms into bars or hammer out impurities in a way that was simply impossible with human strength alone, creating a consistency and quality of metal that was vital for weapons and tools. Perhaps their most dramatic use, however, was in ore processing. Mines would be established near fast-flowing streams, and the trip hammers would be used to crush large chunks of quartz and other ore-bearing rock into a fine powder. This pulverization was an absolutely essential step before the ore could be washed, smelted, or otherwise processed to extract the tiny particles of precious metal within. The sheer scale of rock that could be crushed by a battery of these water-powered hammers was orders of magnitude greater than anything achievable by teams of men with hand-held crushers. This single machine single-handedly boosted the output of mines for iron, copper, silver, and gold, providing the raw material that fed the empire's voracious appetite for metal currency, weapons, and ritual objects. It was the industrial workhorse that turned raw, mountainous rock into tangible wealth. The societal impact of this early automation was profound and, in some ways, foreshadowed debates that would re-emerge centuries later. On one hand, it created immense wealth and propelled technological progress, providing the materials needed for other innovations and raising the standard of living by making essential goods like food and metal tools more plentiful and affordable. On the other hand, it undoubtedly displaced traditional artisans and laborers whose skills were rendered obsolete by the machine's relentless efficiency. The hum and crash of the water-powered hammer marked a pivotal moment in human history, the moment we began to harness natural forces not just to assist human labor, but to replace it on a massive scale, setting in motion an industrial rhythm that would eventually echo across the entire world. Beyond the thunder of industry and the silent strength of bridges, ancient Chinese innovation extended into a far more ethereal realm, the very science of sound itself. While we marvel at their tangible creations, some of their most breathtaking work was designed not to be seen but to be heard, or in some cases not heard at all. Long before the development of modern acoustical engineering, ancient builders were master architects of the invisible, designing spaces with sonic properties so precise and deliberate they seemed to defy the limits of their time. These weren't happy accidents, they were the result of a profound empirical understanding of how sound waves interact with space, stone, and air, creating auditory experiences that ranged from the deeply mystical to the intensely practical. Consider the challenge of communication within the vast, sprawling complex of an imperial palace or a sacred temple. How does a high priest ensure their invocation reaches every corner of a crowded courtyard, or a commander issue orders that can be heard clearly by hundreds of soldiers without shouting themselves hoarse? The answer lay in the subtle geometry of the structures themselves. The Temple of Heaven in Beijing provides a stunning example of this acoustic artistry. The famous echo wall that encircles the imperial vault of heaven is a perfectly circular enclosure with a smooth, hard-glazed surface. Its precise curvature creates a phenomenon known as a whispering gallery. When two people stand at opposite ends of this massive wall, and one speaks softly directly into the masonry, their voice travels along the curved surface with minimal dissipation. The sound waves are guided around the circumference, allowing the whispered message to be heard with astonishing clarity by the listener far away, while remaining inaudible to anyone standing in the center of the courtyard. This wasn't just a parlor trick, it was a sophisticated application of wave physics, creating a private communication channel for ritual officiants across a very public space. But the manipulation of sound went far beyond whispers. For major ceremonies, the goal was often amplification and projection. The design of many ancient Chinese theaters and temple stages demonstrates a keen understanding of sound reflection. These structures were often built with a large, overhead sloping roof and a rear wall that acted as a natural sounding board. When an actor or musician performed on stage, the sound waves would project forward, but a significant portion would hit the rear wall and the angled roof. These surfaces were specifically engineered to reflect those waves back out towards the audience, effectively reinforcing the sound and giving the performer's voice or music a richer, fuller, and far more carrying quality. This same principle was applied to the placement of large bronze bells and stone chimes used in ritual music. They were often suspended in pavilions or positioned in courtyards where the surrounding architecture would catch and resonate with their deep tones, creating an immersive, multi-directional soundscape that could overwhelm the senses and elevate a ceremony from a simple observance to a transcendent experience. Perhaps the most psychologically powerful acoustic designs were those that created a sense of the divine through auditory illusion. In certain tomb complexes and mountain temples, builders constructed what we would now call echo chambers. By designing long, narrow corridors with specific proportions and highly reflective stone walls, they could engineer a dramatic delay between the original sound and its returning echo. A single clap or shout would return not once but multiple times, fading in a cascade of repetitions that could last for several seconds. In the dark, solemn atmosphere of a sacred space, this effect would have been awe-inspiring, making it seem as if the gods or ancestors themselves were answering from the void. This manipulation of reverberation time was a powerful tool for psychological manipulation, deepening the sense of mystery and otherworldliness that was central to religious experience. This mastery of acoustics served a dual purpose, extending from the spiritual directly into the strategic. In military architecture, the control of sound was a matter of life and death. The gate towers and watchtowers along the Great Wall were not just lookout points, they were designed as early warning amplifiers. Their strategic placement and open, pavilion-like structure were optimized to catch the faintest sounds of approaching cavalry or distant troop movements from the plains below. The still night air would carry these sounds up to the watchman long before the enemy was visible, providing crucial extra minutes to light signal fires and prepare the defenses. Conversely, within palace walls, certain chambers used sound-absorbing techniques for secrecy. Rooms designed for sensitive political discussions might feature thick, tapestried walls, acoustic tiles made of porous ceramic, or even double walls filled with sand or rice husks materials that deadened vibrations and prevented conversations from being overheard, creating a secure space for the whispers of statecraft that shaped an empire. This sophisticated interplay of amplification and dampening reveals a culture that didn't just build structures, but engineered entire sensory environments, demonstrating that the most advanced technology is sometimes the one you can only feel with your ears. Yet after engineering the very soundscapes of their world, the ancient Chinese master craftsmen achieved an illusion so perfect it seemed to defy the laws of physics itself, creating objects of such subtlety that their greatest secret remained hidden in plain sight for over 1,000 years. These were the legendary magic mirrors, known in Chinese as two guang giant transparent light mirrors. On the surface, they appear to be beautifully crafted but otherwise ordinary bronze mirrors, with one side polished to a flawless, silvery reflective finish, and the reverse cast with elaborate decorative patterns or auspicious inscriptions. Held in the hand, they function exactly as you would expect, showing a clear, if slightly dim, reflection of your face. Their magic is only revealed under one very specific condition. When a bright beam of sunlight is shined directly onto their polished face, the mirror does something impossible. It becomes transparent, projecting the intricate pattern from its backside onto a wall or screen in stunning detail, as if the solid bronze has suddenly turned into a sheet of glass with a slide projector behind it. For centuries, these mirrors were considered profound mysteries, even after they began to trickle into the West in the 19th century. Western scientists and collectors were utterly baffled. They meticulously measured the mirrors, finding the polished front surface to be completely smooth and seemingly uniform. They theorized that the hidden image must be etched onto the back in some way that was somehow transmitted through the metal, but their own attempts to replicate the effect failed completely. Some even dismissed the phenomenon as a form of trickery or an ancient legend that had been exaggerated. The secret of the magic mirrors wasn't unlocked until the 20th century, when modern tools like precision microscopes and X-ray crystallography finally revealed the astonishing truth. The magic wasn't in the decoration on the back, but in the almost unimaginably subtle manipulation of the metal itself, a masterpiece of differential stress and micro-engineering performed by artisans working entirely by feel and empirical knowledge. The entire miraculous effect hinges on a principle known as differential stress relief. The process began with the casting of the mirror blank. Artisans would use piece mold casting to create a solid bronze disc with the chosen design. A dragon, a phoenix, a scene from mythology standing in bold relief on its back. This was the easy part, the true artistry, the step that transformed the object from a mere mirror into a magical one, came during the laborious and incredibly skilled finishing process. The caster would first meticulously grind and polish the front surface until it was perfectly flat and achieved a high, reflective shine. This was a painstaking task using abrasive sands and stones, but it was the next step that held the key. The artisan would then carefully scrape and abrade the front surface again, but this time in a very specific, non-uniform way. Using their immense experience and a highly trained touch, they would intentionally apply slightly more pressure and remove a minuscule amount more metal from the areas of the front that corresponded directly to the raised patterns on the back. The difference in thickness was vanishingly small, perhaps only micrometers, a fraction of the width of a human hair. This differential scraping created areas of varying stress within the crystalline structure of the bronze. The thinner sections, flexing very slightly under the pressure of the polishing process, would become ever so subtly more convex. To the naked eye, and even to early measuring instruments, the surface remained perfectly smooth and flat. But at a microscopic level, the surface was a complex landscape of undulating hills and valleys, with the hills perfectly matching the pattern on the reverse. These microscopic convex curves are the engine of the magic. When a focused beam of light hits the mirror's surface, the uniformly smooth areas reflect the light normally. But the subtly convex areas, the ONES Chinese letter to the hidden pattern, act like a multitude of tiny, dispersed convex mirrors. Instead of reflecting a parallel beam of light back as a single point, these convex areas scatter the light outward. The collective effect of billions of these microscopic mirrors is to project a bright, clear image of the pattern onto a nearby surface, while the rest of the mirror reflects the light away, creating the stunning illusion that the solid bronze has become a window. This was a technology of breathtaking finesse, a manipulation of material on a scale that borders on the atomic, achieved centuries before the concepts of light wave theory or material stress were formally understood. It represents the absolute pinnacle of the metalworker's art, an art based not on written formulas, but on a deep, intuitive, and generational knowledge of how metal behaves under the tool. The skill required to produce this effect consistently was so rare that even in ancient China, true magic mirrors were always exceedingly precious and uncommon. They were likely never common household items, but rather exquisite luxuries for the imperial court and the most elite levels of society, perhaps used in rituals or as dazzling demonstrations of a patron's access to the most skilled artisans in the empire. They stand as a final, perfect symbol of ancient Chinese technological genius, an invention that combines profound scientific insight with sublime artistic beauty, creating an object of wonder whose secret was so perfectly concealed that it would take the modern world more than a millennium to finally catch up and understand how it was done. What we have witnessed across these 30 forgotten marvels is nothing less than a parallel path of technological progress, a testament to a civilization whose innovative spirit burned as brightly as any in human history. From the mechanical computations of the South-Pointing Chariot and the seismic sentinel of Zhang Heng's dragon vessel to the deep earth ambition of the brine drillers and the silent, sustained revolution of organic farming, ancient China was a powerhouse of invention that solved fundamental problems with a blend of elegance, ingenuity, and profound understanding of the natural world. These were not isolated curiosities. They formed an interconnected web of progress where advancements in metallurgy enabled the crossbow's precision trigger, where the mastery of hydraulics powered both the astronomical clock and the industrial trip hammer, and where a philosophy of working within nature's cycles yielded sustainable agriculture centuries before the term was coined. This was a holistic ecosystem of innovation, thriving for millennia. The question that naturally arises is why so many of these world-changing technologies faded from global memory or were long underestimated in the West. The reasons are complex and often heartbreaking. Many, like Su Song's astronomical clock tower, were victims of war and conquest, their physical forms dismantled, and the specialized knowledge to rebuild them lost in the chaos of dynastic collapse. Others were so far ahead of their time that they became isolated marvels, their principles not disseminated or built upon because the surrounding technological infrastructure wasn't yet ready to support them. There was also a cultural dimension. Chinese chroniclers often documented these inventions as impressive achievements of their era without necessarily viewing them as secrets to be exported or commercialized on a global scale. Furthermore, the sheer durability of Chinese civilization created a different relationship with technology. An invention like the square-pallet chain pump was so perfectly adapted and effective that it remained in use for over 1,000 years, seen not as something to be replaced but perfected and maintained. This contrasts with the Western narrative of constant disruptive technological revolution, leading many historians to overlook technologies that saw incredible longevity rather than rapid obsolescence. Ultimately, this journey through forgotten chapters of history invites us to reconsider the entire map of human innovation. It challenges the simplistic linear narrative of progress that often centers disproportionately on later European developments. The differential gear, the blast furnace, the seed drill, the stern rudder, these were not mere precursors. They were brilliant, fully realized solutions that emerged from a unique and sophisticated engineering tradition. Recognizing this isn't about displacing one historical narrative with another, but about expanding our understanding to create a richer, more complete, and truly global story of human ingenuity. It reminds us that progress is not a single torch passed from one culture to another, but a constellation of flashes of brilliance lighting up across the world at different times, often in isolation, each one a testament to the universal human drive to understand, to create, and to improve. Now we turn this conversation over to you. Which of these 30 forgotten technologies left you the most awestruck? Was it the eerie predictive power of the ancient seismoscope, the sheer mechanical genius of the South-Pointing Chariot's directional computer, or the poetic beauty of the magic mirror hiding its secrets in plain sight for over 1,000 years? Share your thoughts and your favorite invention in the comments below. We read every single one, and if this exploration has reshaped your view of the ancient world, make sure to like this video and subscribe to join us as we continue to uncover the hidden layers of our shared history. The past is filled with forgotten wonders, and together we can bring